You better be listening to Sleazoids or I must break you.
美國政府需要你哋去做一件事，你哋會聯合特種部隊去進行一項高度機密任務。任務未完成之前，你哋嘅身份仍然係囚犯。只要完成任務，不但恢復你哋嘅自由，而且可以成為美國合法公民。
These men are heroes for hire. Violence is their specialty. They are paid to be brave and brutal.
Is it true you mercenaries will do anything for money?
What are you talking about? We're going to pick up $50 million worth of diamonds.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Sleazoids, the podcast where we go down the rabbit hole of 20th century genre fare from the most influential canon classics to the trashiest exploitation films we can get our hands on and invite you to tag along in helping us create a canon of sleaze. Each week is a double feature Grindhouse style where we discuss two films loosely related by subject, genre, actor, filmmaker, or franchise, and at the end of each episode along with our honorary Sleazoids, which you can become by subscribing on Patreon.
Next week, we are talking about the legend Gene Hackman and submarines. So let's go. Join the sleaze.
That's right. How many movies could Jamie be talking about? Think about it.
Narrow it down.
We decide on all the official ratings and rankings for every film that we cover as well. Patreon subscribers also get an honor shout out and 2 bonus episodes every single month, which I think are in our 7th year of. So there's like 180, maybe even 190 bonus episodes at this point, as well as 50 or 60 of our bonus transmission series where we talk about new release genre films all year long. So if you're interested in that, again, patreon.com/Sleazoids podcast. And speaking of which, we had a bunch of people make the jump this week. We're going to give them shout outs here. We had Joe Duffy sign up. We had Mark Thorne, Alex S, who upgraded from $5 a month to $10 a month, is going to be joining us for the monthly virtual screening we try to do on the last Thursday of every given month. We had Chase Mo sign up, Patreon guy, Harry Skoletsky, Emiliano Beaz, DC, hopefully it stands for Diet Coke, our boy, Sun Ra the Third, Brian Olson, Baram, Billy Huston, Nikolai Urishev, Jeff Kohler, Snacks, Mortis, Senior Hefe, maybe? Senior Jeff, Dillard's Department, Garrett, Celine, KR666, and last but not least, Mitchell Camp. So thanks so much to all of you folks. Hope you're enjoying all those bonus episodes. We appreciate that support.
Yeah, thank you very much, guys.
That's the one plug for the week. The other plug, as always, is Apple Podcasts and Spotify. If you're listening on either one of those platforms, make sure to give us a good old rating and a review over there. It helps us climb the ranks and find new listeners, and we appreciate that support as well. And the last plug, as always, is merch. If you like the poster art that based out of Toronto horror artist Trevor Henderson did for our show, you can get that put on basically anything that you can think of. And you freaks have thought of a lot of stuff. You have bought notebooks, you have bought pillows, you have bought coffee mugs, you have bought hoodies. If you're interested in anything like that, the link is in the description to this episode, as well as over at sleazoidspodcast.com. But that is it for the intro. Welcome back to another week. As always, I am your host, Josh Lewis, and joining me also, as always, is my co-host,
Jamie Miller. Welcome back, everybody.
Welcome. I believe 2 weeks ago would have been the last time you folks over on the main feed would have heard from us, where we would have had special returning guest Mr. Will Menaker of Chapo Trap House and Movie Mindset back on the show to talk about the diverse career of Hollywood filmmaker Fred Zinnemann. We talked about his lavish 1950s Western romance roadshow adaptation of Roger and Hammerstein's 1940s Broadway musical hit Oklahoma from 1955. You might have heard of it. And we paired it with, on the opposite side of the style spectrum, his 1970s like new Hollywood procedural, almost docu-fiction adaptation of Frederick Forsyth's best-selling political assassination thriller novel called The Day of the Jackal from 1973.
What a double feature. I love that every time I hear it. Yeah, and by the way, people, Oklahoma is way darker than I thought it was, and it presents itself as. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
We've talked
you
about it a couple times.
You might think one of those films is darker than the other one because a guy goes around killing a whole bunch of people, but then there's one film where a guy, the singing, smiling cowboy, sings a song about making a guy kill himself.
Yeah, full musical number about that. I couldn't believe my ears. So it's absolutely wild. If you haven't seen it, it's a little overlong, but honestly, it is worth it for the spectacle and just some of the the darker undertones of that whole thing. And Day of the Jackal is also just a great political thriller. So.
Yeah, and then last week over on the Patreon feed, exclusive for the patrons, following up that episode, we actually did your guys' patron-voted episode, because once every 2 months over on the Patreon, if you are a patron, you get to nominate a double feature that we discuss, and we talk about the most upvoted one that wins in the poll. And so the one that won most recently was a double feature of dark, transgressive, restaurant-related art house satires that both involve cannibalism, which sounds like a very hyper-specific double feature, and it was. We talked Paul Bartel's absurdist, almost sort of John Waters-esque, like sexual revolution murder scheme, like husband and wife rom-com called Eating Raoul from 1982, and the pairing was Peter Greenaway's very vivid and decadent and disturbing art film merging of like a British gangster movie, an erotic romance, and like a Thatcher era like political horror comedy. And crazy title here: The Cook, the Thief, His Wife, and Her Lover, which was from 1989.
Oh yeah, unbelievable film. And specifically, Michael Gambon is truly plays one of the biggest asshole characters we have ever talked about on the show. If you enjoy that kind of character, I can't help but recommend this film. I mean, either way, you should. It's a beautiful film, but you will have to endure like almost 2 hours of Gambon just assaulting your ears and assaulting people on screen. It's pretty wild. And it is, I love that both films are kind of just, the cannibalism is kind of more of a side note on both of them, which I really kind of enjoy.
Yeah, they kind of build to it in their finales in some offbeat ways. So it's kind of a spoiler, but one of them, it's literally in the title. So
yes, exactly.
You're kind of waiting for it the whole time. So again, if you haven't heard that episode, that was last week exclusively over on the Patreon. And once again, if you want to have the power to vote to make us talk about the movies you want us to talk about, again, over on the Patreon, you can make us do that, and that's what you guys did last week. But moving on to this week, we are once again joined by a very special returning guest who has to make an appearance every year to keep holding the belt over his head, because he guested twice in the first year, and as long as he keeps coming on every year, no one will ever surpass his amount of guest spots. That is our Australian correspondent calling over from the Boonta Vista podcast, Mr. Andrew Law. Andrew, welcome back.
My beautiful boys, my Canadian friends, my Commonwealth brothers.
Yes,
it's so good to be here.
Yeah, Canada and Australia, we've been working on a deal. We're not supposed to talk about it yet, but we've been...
That's right.
We're looking at our friends.
We are cutting the US out. You guys are done.
Just fight with us, fellow Sleazoids, please.
Yeah. I feel like the Australian wing of the Sleazoids would actually be pretty powerful. They're pretty vocal sometimes in the voting process.
Yes.
Australians, always pretty vocal, I think.
Podcasting is natural for you guys. It makes a lot of sense that you do what you do. But Andrew, welcome back. You, over the course of your tenure on this show, have brought every type and style of movie basically under the moon. But you have brought a genre on we haven't talked about in a while, and a genre that someone I don't think has brought on in a while. So what are we talking about this week, and what are the two films?
We're talking a pairing of man on a mission going behind enemy lines, Dirty Dozen vibe kind of films here. We've got Sammo Hung's 1987 Eastern Condors, which I hadn't seen actually before getting into it for this, and was very, very pleasantly surprised by.
Yeah, you sent me a list of what you've been watching recently, or what you were planning to watch, and there was a lot of Hong Kong cinema on your list of stuff. And I literally just looked at your list of movies, and I was like, well, I see one that I know Jamie loves, if you would want to talk about that one.
Oh yeah.
That's partially how this came together.
And I was very happy to. And the other is the 1968 film Dark of the Sun, about some guys going behind enemy lines to get some diamonds back. And how it all goes wrong, as it often does in these kinds of movies.
Yeah, Yeah,
right.
yeah. No, I'm very excited about this because I think both of these are two of the more sort of like underrated and also pretty politically troubling, ultra-violent like men on a mission films, and also made by like pretty unexpected filmmakers that I think you wouldn't have, you know, like pegged as people who would make one of the better or more famous men on a mission movies. Because obviously you have the arts comedy martial arts legend Sammo Hung, who was literally just famous for being an overweight Hong Kong man who had the grace and the moves of any Hong Kong martial arts movie star of the time. So the idea of him doing like a Rambo style Hong Kong war movie like that is pretty wild. And then with the other one, we're going back to the sort of the original era of the 60s men on a mission era, where you had things like The Great Escape and The Dirty Dozen, but made by the Powell and Pressburger cinematographer Jack Cardiff. And you're just like, the man who shot some of the most like beautiful Technicolor movies of the 1940s was like, what if I just made the grisliest, pulpiest, like Congo diamond mission brute nasty film ever?
I was definitely surprised by how brutal it was for a picture from 1968.
Yeah, and how at a certain point it just kind of like hits you over the head with it on purposely. So even within its style and everything, I mean, it we'll get to it, but it feels like it has this thing where it tries to ground itself in some history, but all of the things you're watching on screen are so over the top and very just action, like straight up action film. They're
like, dude, what if the Dirty Dozen had like a chainsaw fight
exactly.
made by like the most respected British filmmaker? You're just like, wow, okay.
It's pretty wild. So, yeah, and Eastern Condors. I mean, I watched this a few years ago and fell in love with it. I mean, mixing martial arts with Rambo is just I can't help but love that. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's two of Jamie's favorite things in just one movie, just like that.
And Sammo Hung, baby. I love Sammo. It's awesome.
Gotta love Sammo. But yeah, so this is going to be a fun double feature, and I think we're going to jump right into it here. We're going to kick things off with Eastern Condors. All right, we are talking Eastern Condors, the 1987 Hong Kong Men on a Mission war action film directed by Sammo Hung, written by Barry Wong, and also starring Sammo Hung as the leader of a group of Chinese-American army soldier prisoners who are offered pardons, U.S. citizenship, and $200,000 to participate in a covert mission in the jungles of Vietnam and destroy a missile arms depot left behind by the Americans while they were pulling out of the Vietnam War, hopefully as they see it before it falls into the hands of the Vietnamese troops. And believe it or not, this is actually our first time officially talking about legendary Hong Kong actor, martial artist, stunt coordinator, and director Sammo Hung, having previously, I think, come up in conversation as like an actor and a fight choreographer in some previous episodes, but mostly due to his relationship with longtime friend and former Peking Opera School student Jackie Chan, where both of them learned singing, dancing, and kung fu together, and who later into both their careers frequently co-starred together, or at the very least co-fought together. That's where Sammo has mostly come up. Like, he's been an extra in a couple of things that we've talked about. We've seen him do like a little fight here or there. And Sammo is a very interesting case because he's a little bit older than Jackie and some of the other guys. And he entered the film industry in the 1960s, basically at the peak of the Shaw Brothers and Golden Harvest era, where due to his, I will say, his size and his looks, which were not as movie star ready as someone like Jackie Chan, for example, he made his way up the ranks slowly as like an extra and a stunt fighter and a fight choreographer to director, making appearances in like Jackie and some of the Bruce Lee films in the 70s, but even earlier than Jackie in the King Hu movies. So things like A Touch of Zen. I remember talking about Sammo having a fight in A Touch of Zen, and that was where he worked along legendary fight choreographers like Corey Yun, who did like Yes Madam and Righting Wrongs and a lot of Jet Li movies, and Wu Ping Yun, who did like Drunken Master for Jackie Chan, Once Upon a Time in China, Crouching Tiger, Matrix, all that stuff. And also martial artists like Yun Biao and Yun Hua, who literally all four of those guys make appearances in this movie as members of his team or baddies that they essentially fight. So if you like Men on a Mission style war movies and you were just like, what if every legendary Hong Kong martial artist or stunt coordinator filled out the cast? Like, I don't think there's another movie that provides that for you.
Yeah, honestly. And again, the mix of kind of adding the whole mercenary and Rambo effect of having machine guns and rocket launchers and stuff. It's just not things you often see in the movies that Sammo would make. I mean, there's guns and stuff in them, but oftentimes it's kind of like disarming people or so that they can get into the fighting. Whereas this
it was mostly in like the cop movies, right? Like it was kind of like, because, you know, like as a director, Sammo and Jackie carved out a very specific niche as kung fu action comedians. Their films were frequently buddy movies or farces or adventures, and they really did weaponize the fact that, you know, they were guys who didn't just go around shooting people like American movie stars did. They were guys who were really athletic. They were acrobatic. They would flip around on someone. They would disarm someone and kick them in the face or something like that. And Sammo was a particularly, you know, legendary because, he was a pretty large boy that you wouldn't expect to be able to move with just like the athleticism that he actually had. And he frequently, I watched an interview with him where he was like, I deliberately played with that. He's like, I didn't find it offensive that anyone called me fat. And one of my first movies was called Enter the Fat Dragon, and I came up with the title. He's like, I thought it was great. It was a selling point.
Yeah, he would often use it in his physical comedy outside of the fighting and everything like that. Like it's part of his charm, really. And
he was like, wouldn't it be funny if like a schlubby food truck hustler was doing crazy martial arts skills that you would see in like, I don't know, like the period martial arts films. Like when Shaw Brothers was still making movies about like Shaolin monks and fight academy students, he was like, dude, what if I was like a goofball roommate or a bozo cop, like a fat cop, and I was able to do the same things those guys would do? That was like the niche that he had. Yeah,
it adds like this like realistic working man getting into these scenarios. Like another one that I really like from him is a pedicab driver. And it's just, it feels like, you know, with Jackie Chan, obviously he can pull that off because he has the same kind of charm and he's always trying to like not be messed with kind of thing. He's always defending himself. But he still looks like a movie star. And the moment he takes his shirt off, he looks like Bruce Lee. You know, he's just cut as hell and everything like that. So having Sammo all of a sudden do like front flips into glass and do that move where you're like laying on your back and then just with your feet you kick up into standing again and start fighting. Like it just adds this kind of this element you don't often see. And he moves just as fast as everybody as well. Like he's honestly, Jackie probably has a little bit of an edge to him when it comes to the stunt work that he's willing to do. But when it comes to like the actual physicality of the ground fighting and his comedy and charm, like he pretty much matches him. And it's amazing.
He's an incredible athlete.
Yeah, absolutely. Is
there
ways
like?
I was just going to ask if you guys had like a favorite Sammo movie that you've seen outside of this, directing wise, because I've seen a few at this point, but I didn't know if you guys have seen a bunch of them yet.
I have a boring answer. Wheels on Meals, I think, is the one that I always feel like is the one where I just like pull up scenes from it sometimes, and that's because I particularly love the hangout aspect of those characters, and the final climactic fight stuff in that is just like ridiculous. I mean, Sammo always did that. He always like built his way up to like a fantastic final set piece, even something like Dragons Forever, which I need to rewatch because I don't remember like loving that one, but I do remember loving like the final 20 minutes of that movie.
Yes.
And, like the big fight with like Billy Chow, and there's some incredible work in that. How about for you, Andrew?
It is probably either Meals on Wheels or Project A, I think.
Project A.
Which also has, you know, just incredible fight choreography all the way through. And I think what's also probably consistent with the movies we're talking about is they're a bit more like action packed all the way through, depending on which movie you pick, whether it's more kind of comedy leaning or whatever. The action might be a bit more sporadically placed through. So I have been watching a bunch of these recently, and part of the reason that I was going through and thinking, yeah, I'll find another Sammo Hung movie to go with this, and then I was like watching all these movies and kept sort of going, no, that's not really hitting the spot, because either it's like the concept behind the movie would be a bit misguided, like what's the...
You never know if you're throwing one on from that era, whether the comedy is going to be a killer for you or not.
Well, yeah, and there was one I watched called Heart of Dragon, where
Classic.
Jackie is a cop and Sammo directs the movie and is playing his disabled older brother that he has to look after.
And it is worth noting, Sammo Hung is straight up playing Simple Jack.
Yeah.
But what if...
Yeah, and everybody all the way through the movie is just calling him the most politically incorrect things, and all of his friends are little children, because that's the same thing, I guess. Also, everyone's calling him fatty constantly. But that's every movie. That's like every movie. I also watched Skinny Tiger and Fatty Dragon. Was another one, and Enter the Fat Dragon. I didn't realize there was a remake of Enter the Fat Dragon with Donnie Yen in the lead role from like the 2010s.
Well, that doesn't make any sense. Donnie Yen is an incredibly slim man.
I think they had to fat suit Donnie Yen, like the clumps.
No, see, I don't like that. That's not as good. No. That's not as cool anymore.
No. And like the whole joke in the first one was just that Sammo can fight like or better than Bruce Lee in a choreography sense, and he looks like he does. But yeah, there were a bunch of them that I was watching, and either watching and saying, "Wow, the politically incorrect comedy in this is hitting really hard all the way through," or in the case of like Heart of Dragon, it's one of those movies where you're watching it and going, "You gotta pick a tone here. Like, what are we doing? Is this like is it like a drama? Is it a family drama? Is it a comedy? Is it an action movie?" And it's really all over the place. And they have, pieces of great action choreography dotted throughout. And that's also got Yuen Wah and a bunch of the same guys again that are in this movie. And so, it's got all these great bits of action choreography, but every time Sammo's on screen, they're like screeching halt to that, because Sammo directed it and he said, "Oh yeah, the producers and everything like wanted me to be doing fights in it." And I was like, "It doesn't make any sense. My character is very disabled." So he's not going to be, just suddenly doing sick kung fu. And so he's going for the authenticity at this point. And it's like, again, not sure what we're doing here, Whereas I think Eastern Condors and Project A and Meals on Wheels are all much more akin to the movies that...
Yeah, they still have extreme tonal whiplash. I mean, especially Eastern Condors, but it has, I think, an incredibly productive tonal whiplash in a way where you're not confused. I think you're more just consistently shocked by it in a really cool way. And I think it's important to mention, just because you do have to understand how much of a subversion Eastern Condors was from like the usual Sammo movie, I guess. Like, even in terms of what he looks like, he lost 30 pounds for this role and talked about the fact that he like worked out for like 6 months and ate nothing but skinless chicken and rice. And he was like, "I'm going to play like a little bit more of like a kind of stoic, tough guy soldier," because he was deliberately courting the kind of tonal intensity and gruesomeness of like a Hollywood war film. And so he wanted that quality to the film, but also he's incredibly skilled at what he does. So he was like, "I'm also going to have obviously the high octane and dangerous looking like stunt spectacular set pieces that of Hong Kong. And also I'm going to have a bit of that hangout character personality energy energy, because that's just what I like in my stories. And so, here he was able to find that connection, I think, by choosing an American sort of men on a mission film, because he was like, those were the movies that, instead of being about the, statuesque, like chiseled action star of, I don't know, Stallone, or, if you want to get lower into this, like your Chuck Norris, or your, because Missing in Action was another movie I thought about a little bit while I was watching this. It felt like Sammo was like, I'm trying to deliver on that type of product, but I'm going to do it with my particular skills. And so the results are like a weird thing that sometimes does tonally shift between, like, this is his Rambo First Blood Part 2. It's crazy, intense, explosive, slow motion. But then he'll do a section that feels like he's doing more of the Vietnam drama. He'll do a section of child soldiers doing Russian roulette, like out of The Deer Hunter. Or he'll do a section where he goes so deep into the absurdist action of Hong Kong that you feel like you're watching like an element of like Tropic Thunder or something like that. Yeah. And, all while trying to maintain that kind of bleak and grisly momentum of, the classic men on a mission films, the Dirty Dozen, Where Eagles Dare is kind of a big one too, where you could, like the quality he wanted was that, like, in something like Dirty Dozen, you've got Lee Marvin, Donald Sutherland, John Cassavetes, Charles Bronson, I'm forgetting other name, but you got a lot of them in there, and you enjoy cracking jokes and hanging out with those guys. And then they all just get absolutely fucking ripped to shreds by gunfire. And like, that is what creates kind of the drama of the film for you. You don't need to necessarily spend a ton of time on characterization. You don't need to spend a ton of time on backstory. You can economically, in 95 minutes, just being like, here's their mission. Here's what they're doing. Here's them bonding. Here's them dying horrible and cruel deaths, and you're going to feel sad about it. And now imagine doing all of that, but then you have every single person in the movie is like one of the greatest martial artists to ever live. And they're like, not only am I going to fire a machine gun or throw a grenade at somebody, I'm going to do like backflips while I do it. And I'm going to, jump kick, spin kick. I'm going to do crazy, crazy moves and choreography. And Sam, obviously, his whole career, he had an incredible control of how to shoot that stuff, how to frame it, how to time it in the edit. And he brings all of that just to a Vietnam War stunt spectacular.
I think it's definitely more brutal than a lot of the action that you would normally see in like a Hong Kong martial arts epic, I think. I'm sure there are people who are much, much better schooled in this particular class of filmmaking than me. Like a lot of the
mix of Hong Kong and horror sometimes would cross over into the more like sort of like grisly department, but I think otherwise you are correct.
Yeah, and then I guess there's little elements, like there is that, I think is it 8 Diagram Pole Fighter, where he does like just mangle that guy's teeth at one point with the bar or something like that. So there's like little moments, but this one feels far more violent and aggressive in that sense than the majority of them, for sure.
Yeah, and I think it ties to what you were saying, Josh, about like this having so much influence of that Dirty Dozen, suicide mission type of movie, where that's the other thing that's sort of quite different to me is in a lot of these movies, the heroes are often in peril, and one of the things that I've always loved about Jackie Chan movies, Sammo Hung movies, is that they take a fucking beating. Mm-hmm. Throughout those movies, they're not like Seagal movies where he kind of just glides through the entire film and never gets touched and he's never in danger or anything like that. But like a lot of Jackie Chan movies, part of the appeal of them to me is that he's rising against adversity. He's getting the shit beaten out of him during the film. But that said, there's never any lead characters dying. And often I would say that most of the combat involves like non-fatally beating the shit out of opponents. People kind of get knocked out and then they're out of frame and that sort of stuff. Maybe like, the big baddie in the movie dies in the confrontation. But largely speaking, I kind of consider a lot of those movies to be pretty low body count despite, all the choreographed violence in them. And I think that he does produce a different effect here by introducing this large cast of characters and letting you sit with them for a while, and then, also quite immediately going, and one's dead straight away. Straight at the start.
Yeah,
of the mission.
that's maybe one of my favorite aspects of the movie, that the deaths are just so sudden and cruel and random. Like, this movie is very merciless. It moves really, really quickly. And like, when you're introduced to it, it is straight up, they were like, yeah, here's the Lieutenant Lamb, Mr. Vampire himself, for anyone who's seen the Mr. Vampire movies. And he's
Ghost
literally
cop.
receiving the debrief on the Eastern Condors mission from his American contact, explaining, like, we're going to take these Chinese American mercenary group and we're going to go into Vietnam. We're going to clean up this Americans mess. And, you know, he's Americanized enough that he even like sort of like respects the flag, and he's the one who helps it like raise it by climbing the pole. And then he heads immediately to a nearby prison. He's like, I'm going to select a group of 10. And there's this great beat too, where they're trying to show you the Western forces and the sort of tension there is between the two, where I think one of the prison guard guys like, well, why don't you just like take 100? I can always arrest like more Chinese guys so that you can use them for your body count army or whatever. And he's like, no, fine. I just need 10 highly skilled guys. It's fine. We'll get these guys. And we're introduced to all of these prisoners right away with sort of typewritten on the screen, where they were like, here's all of these, you know, guys who have gone through the sort of immigrant experience in the United States and have gotten into, you know, different levels of crime, we'll say. There's like drug trafficking, arms smuggling, bank fraud, kidnapping, murder, arson, extortion, and all of them obviously end up being led by Tung Ming's son, played by Sammo Hung, who is serving the longest life sentence for killing a federal agent, I think that they say. But we never quite know the full backstory of that, because he kind of seems to say that it's like bullshit, or but it's never really explicitly stated, because most of this movie is just these guys being thrown directly into this Dirty Dozen style suicide mission, top secret mission, to win their freedom and get their citizenship and do everything, and they basically all just agree, because as they put it, it's like going anywhere is better than doing time here, so might as well just go there and see what's up. But before they've even landed, and one of my favorite examples I think of this sort of cruelty I was talking about, and the meanness of this movie that's maybe not even present in other Sammo movies, is that one of the guys dies by like not pulling his parachute correctly, or it like malfunctioning, and he literally jumps out of the plane and instantly dies. And they're already doing the scene where they're like, my brother, and they're holding him on the ground. They're like, damn, I guess it be like that sometimes.
Yeah, and it just shows like how they view them as completely expendable, because they haven't even trained them enough to operate the simple act of pulling the parachute and landing to get to the very place you need to do the mission in, the very start of it. So it's clear that they don't care right from the get-go. It's a great little detail. I also do like the American flag being stuck and them having to help it. It is just like it's a perfect image for the rest of the movie, with them doing all of America's dirty work essentially in Vietnam right now.
Well, it's a nice little commentary on like their view of the American military as well, which is like everybody's just a mindless robot there to follow orders, and when something doesn't go right, none of them know what to do. They're all standing there saluting the flag, which has got caught at the top of the flagpole, so it's like at half-mast, and they can't get it up there. There's somebody, you know, bugling, and all these other guys standing there saluting while they raise the flag. And they've seen this happening as they're on the way into their meeting, and it's when they're coming back from their meeting and everybody's still standing there with the bugle still going, because they don't know what to do.
Yeah, Mr. Vampire is like, I'll just climb that shit myself and go fix that.
Yeah. It's like, idiots, let me get up there and sort it out. But I think that's like a little commentary. But yeah, the first death in the movie, again, I think is a really perfect little encapsulation of the tonal whiplash that you're talking about, Josh, and also, I guess, kind of this kind of mashing together of these different tones of Hong Kong cinema, because the character who dies is like a comic relief character right at the start. Yeah. You know, his name's like Stuttering Wah, or I can't remember the guy's name because he was in the movie so briefly. But you know, he's already been the kind of comic relief a few times where, you know, they're going around the room saying like, you know, what they're going to do when they get their money and get their part, and they get to him and he starts talking and goes but and they go forget about it. And as he's jumping from the plane, they're saying to everybody, remember, count to 20 and then pull your chute. And then, they all land, but they can't find the stuttering guy. They find him. He's crashed through a tree. He's on the ground, blood coming out of his mouth. And he's saying, 16. And so it's simultaneously a joke about how this dude has been stuttering for so long on the way down that he
got the
pull his
timing
chute in
wrong.
time. But also, it's a reminder to the rest of the crew that, this is real. This is real, and any of you could die, and there's no guarantee that any of you are coming back. So that little moment is such a, jarring mashing together of, comic relief in that Hong Kong cinema way that is often at somebody's expense about a physical characteristic.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that's what's so fun about the tone of this movie is that it is such a full throttle merging of doing an 80s Reagan era American maximalist war action product, and it all the ugliness that kind of comes with doing something like that. But when you merge it with the absurdist
Meals
kinetic
on Wheels kind of stuff,
bombast and the sense of the slapstick martial arts ballet that Sammo is so familiar with, that interacts with the more somber and grisly Vietnam War drama stuff in such a way that I found this constantly just surprising and inventive and engaging through the entire thing, because you'll get an incredible moment of the introduction of the female-led Cambodian guerrilla soldiers that are led by Sammo's future wife, actually, Joyce Gadenzi. And when they do that first infiltration of the base, which is happening sort of concurrently with the parachuting down, it's this slow motion, sick guitar theme playing while they're sprinting. And it's something that actually Tarantino stole straight up for Inglourious Bastards when they do the bit where they have the gun on their arm and they're trying to shoot their way into the Nazi theater or whatever. And it's the dun 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 dun. And as they're slow-mo running in, and you just get these, just badass sort of female soldiers doing crazy, jump kicks and throwing knives, and you're oh, this is what I love from Hong Kong. But then he'll just throw in a detail what if I have a shot where the bottom portion of the frame is clearly a guy's legs spread apart, and you just watch her put a knife into a dude's asshole. And it's and it's a gag, but it's gross, and it's just
hyper violent.
Yeah.
I was looking through reviews on the Letterboxd, and there is one 4-star review from the user account Operation Condor, and the entire review is all lowercase, no punctuation. A guy gets stabbed in the asshole. 2 words.
That's awesome.
It's true.
And he does.
What else
really
can
does.
you say?
And I do also love that they're kind of established as the first fighters within the movie too, because most of it with Sammo before they establish that they're fighting is all of the setup, to the plane, what they're going, what the getting the convicts together, landing, all of that. Whereas they're the first actual martial arts scene and they also establish the whole movie where they're gonna have guns and martial arts kind of at the same time. And I love the tonal changes in this. I think it's fantastic, and it's cool too that it kind of establishes that the people that they're about to become allies with, and kind of the local rebellion, doesn't really need their help either. Even though they're not technically there to help, they're really technically there to get their weaponry back that they left behind. But it does show that there's kind of already a force against the force that they're going to be fighting too.
There's I was reading just about the intro where they all get sort of looped in. I was reading a thing on the IMDb entry for it that says Sammo Hung's original cut of the film was much longer but was heavily cut down before release. This is why original 4-minute-long Hong Kong trailers for the film show deleted and alternate scenes, including many scenes from the original first act of the film, with all the main heroes in prison, being beat up by prison guards, getting into fights with them and other prisoners, a basketball scene which includes another massive fight, and a prison riot scene. The training scenes, during which more background about all the characters were revealed, was also cut. There is no extended version of the film or any deleted footage. So I'm
Damn.
assuming that would have been the entire bit where we get much more background than we do about, like, you know, Sammo Hung's character and how he found himself in prison, because as it is in the final film, it's basically just like a very fast Dirty Dozen style, like, single shot of somebody.
This guy's name is Onion Head, and these two guys are brothers. And
These guys are brothers. They are from this guy's Chinese. This guy's a Chinese national. This guy's Chinese.
This is
Vietnamese.
this guy's
Here's his
deal.
crime. Yeah, exactly. And it's very, very even the extent to which they say, you know, you're going to receive a month's training. And then you're going to go on this mission, and then it's like a cut to them on the plane, like going to the mission, you know. So I definitely got the sense watching that first bit of the movie that, like, it felt very rushed, but reading that afterwards makes complete sense in terms of going, oh yeah, it feels like they just yanked whole sections out to make it shorter.
It'd feel really interesting to have all of that background with them too, though, and then make the tonal changes when they start to die off. I'd be curious if you had that like extra 20 solid minutes of their prison life and the background and everything. Once they have those, like, you know, those more emotional deaths, there'd probably be a lot more weight to them. And again, it'd be just interesting to see him do tonal changes with more characterization than there is, because
they do a lot. They love that scene where, like, the guys are just, you know, committed their bodies to the cause or something, or they just like made a mistake or something, and then all of a sudden they're like holding their hand while they bleed out and they cry, and like they do that scene for almost every character who dies who's part of the mission at some point. But without the time spent with them, I don't think it's like that powerful, but I do think that it works. Like, I definitely go through this and I'm like, there's a part of me that thinks that the economy of it is pretty admirable, even if it wasn't exactly what it was that he originally shot.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do like little details that they have with the characters, even though it feels like there's so many of them, you don't get to really know you don't get to know them too well, but I think each of them has kind of a discernible kind of trait that they'll show a lot of the time. Like, I really liked the guy that kept hitting on the rebels and failing miserably. I really had a good time with that guy. Or even I think it might be the same guy I'm talking about, actually, but he has a like an unlit cigarette the entire movie, and then you find out at the end when he's, you know, about to pass on, and kind of as he's fighting back, that he's gonna light it for the last time, and it was like a cigarette that one of his friends died in the war with him or something, that he's kept ever since. So just these little details.
That's cool. Actually Corey Yun, believe it or not.
Yes.
He's because that's a great moment where, and then Yun Wu Ping is the guy playing Grandpa, so those two guys get a great scene together where he's delivering an impassioned speech about how he's okay with dying because at least he's dying in the East rather than the West, which is a great line. And they're the two guys holding off the Vietnamese troops from like coming over the sort of the bridge using like that big artillery gun, and then the tanks roll up on them, and you're just like, God damn, everything that could go wrong for these guys is going wrong. Oh yeah, absolutely. And speaking of just like the tanks and the weaponry, the action variety in this thing is pretty unbelievable, because like you have the martial arts and you have the guns and all of that, but it's the way that they utilize them, and they still mix in some almost like that it's not wire play by any chance, but there's stuff that kind of breaks from reality, like when Sammo Hung is bouncing from rooftop to rooftop, because it has kind of like a I think they have kind of like a mesh that he can bounce off of, and that's how he gets to a certain area with a machete. So they still have the fact that he's doing that thing you've seen in a war movie where he's like, I need to sneak up behind the army, take their like artillery bunker, and literally just fucking go Rambo mode and start using their giant machine gun and just laying into the entire army in their backs. And it's a scene you've seen before, but you've never seen Stallone leapfrog his way into the straw roof and burst fucking through it and start stabbing the shit out of people. Yes. Like that's the Hong Kong sensibility coming in. Yeah, totally.
But again,
and
more brutal than what I'm used to seeing in a Hong Kong action movie. There are like a bunch of scenes of, people getting limbs cut off, people getting stabbed with things, people getting stuff shot through their necks, people getting
But see, that's that
decapitated.
disturbing like American war movie thing, right? So like that's just it, is it's combining both like completely thoroughly, because even like the look of it, it has that that sunny, sweaty, like when I think about how Jack Cardiff shot Rambo First Blood Part 2, like it's kind of what I think about the way that they, the swampy locations they found here, the way that they're seeing a boat like from Apocalypse Now, and they're just like, those guys would have been fucking finished in Apocalypse Now if the people trying to kill them were able to do like these giant slow-mo flips and dropping grenades into the boat and shit like that,
Yeah. And they also seem to, some of the more accented moments are like when they save a lot of the big blood squib stuff. Like, don't get me wrong, there's stuff throughout with the fighting and shooting, but I feel like one of the biggest moments, for instance, is when you find out that one of the rebel women has betrayed them in some way, and she gets shot while two of them, the other two rebels, find out, and they're kind of like crossed between her with guns, and they have her at gunpoint. And then all of the sudden, the what's the actress's name? She's the leader of the rebels.
Joyce
Gadenzi.
Yes, they have this giant blood squib explode on her face, and it's shocking, honestly, because the majority of the film, it has it, but it's nothing that visceral, and it's because it's coming from a character that we have grown to think is a good person, and for the most part I think they are. I can't remember the context of how they portray the group, if it's something to do with circumstance or if they actually were a spy the entire time. But
they were being a spy, because I think you're talking about when it's when they do the jungle chase sequence. It's like right after that, where I do want to mention too another part of mixing the crazy absurdity of what can physically happen in a Hong Kong movie, but the brutality of an American war film, when he uses a coconut leaf as like an arrow like projectile blow dart at one point, which is just an incredible moment. But you're thinking of, so when they're hiding out in the rainy jungle after having sort of like evaded the Vietnamese troops, you get a bit of the hangout where they're like blowing out a birthday cake, and then there's a guy taking a piss, and the one soldier hitting on the gorilla ladies and all of that, and they end up getting surrounded by the Vietnamese, and it's because one of the girls was an actual informant and told them where they were, let them get captured by the POW and taken to the POW camp that they are taken to, and then they find out while they're there, they see her not having been tied up and like put underwater and tortured like everybody else is. They see her being actually hanging out with them and being like, and so that's why when briefly when they're making their escape mission, not everybody knows yet, just I think one person knows, and then at one point they straight up point the finger at her and they say the reason we're all here is because of her. And then that's when the two Cambodian like gorilla girls are like, yeah, one of our own betrayed us, so we are going to execute her in the back of the head, like right here, spray her blood everywhere. And yeah, there's tons of like, one of the other examples, I think, of what you're talking about, Jamie, is when they first arrive at that POW camp and they do the deer hunter Russian roulette thing, which is like a crazy thing to do. Because even when the deer hunter came out, people were a little concerned about it because it was just something like there weren't real documented stories of that happening. It was really how extremely horrific can we make the Vietnamese look in this context. But it's Sammo takes it a step further and he's like, dude, what if it was child soldiers doing it for their amusement? And there's a part where they literally put the gun to one of the prisoners' heads and just boom, blows his brains straight out, and it literally visceral chunks come out like the other side of his head. So it's him mixing the absurdity of like, what if I do something funny with like child soldiers, but what if the funny thing they do is like the horrific things they do in a Vietnam War drama, and tonally your brain just goes, Jesus Christ, what is going on?
There's so much happening. It does just feel
that one guy who dies because he runs into a kid and he's like, I can't kill a kid. That'd be pretty sick and disturbing of me to murder a child. And then the child just fucking stabs him to death. That was the bit that reminded me of a Tropic Thunder gag when Ben Stiller is like running away and there's literally that kid on top of him just fucking shanking him
over and over again. Yeah, and he just like flings him into the river. Absolutely. Yeah, it definitely and again, it kind of has this dark irony to it. It is kind of a gag, but this guy that you've been with now has just been stabbed in the stomach by just a child soldier, and he's going to die. So it feels like Sammo is constantly balancing those things in such a cool way. And it is more ruthless than ever. Like he even has just classic Rambo war shots where like bodies will be floating in the river and people will take machine guns to it. You know what I mean? Like just for the ruthlessness of it all. And it's and I do like too that it's a pretty simple, like the way that he does the plotting is very simple. So it kind of always happens where, you know, you kind of discover a new location or a new character, and then that because they're discovering something, they're being ambushed for some reason, which causes a martial arts scene to happen. So he does a cool way of also figuring out the way to mix Rambo in with, you know, how a martial arts scene would work in the context of that. So
there was a review from Slant Magazine of the Blu-ray release of this, and the top line of the review is Hung's 1987 film is a collision of disparate tones held together through sheer force of will. And I like that as accurate. A kind of encapsulation of the film as well. And like the tone sort of, I don't know if tone is the right word to use, but like we do sort of move through these phases in the film where we get the they're all in prison, you know, being pulled out to go on a mission at the start, which is very, very Dirty Dozen style. I rewatched the Dirty Dozen recently, and I'm always kind of struck by how much of the movie is spent with them, like with all of them before they go on the mission. The mission's like the last, I don't know, 15 or 20 minutes of the movie, I want to say.
Yeah.
It's really not that much, but you spend a great deal of time with all these guys, with them training together, you know, all that sort of stuff. But you get a snippet of that here. You get the creeping through the jungle and stealthily dispatching Vietnamese soldiers. So that's where you get all your cool hand-to-hand combat. You get Yuen Biao like doing soccer kicks with coconuts to hit dudes in the head, like all the
awesome, because they pick up him because he's like a local get rich quick hustler named Rat, and his godfather Yung Lung, who everyone just calls like Nut Job, and they think he's like sort of like mentally slow as well, but is revealed to not be. And I think that's why he's able to be the one who points out that she betrayed them all, because he's like I was pretending
the whole time.
I was pretending that, you know, just for this moment, because I didn't trust any of you and all that stuff. And as they're picking up an entire sort of like crew of people and moving through the jungle and getting the kind of the stealthy jungle sequences that Andrew was talking about, the POW camp sequences that you expect of this movie, and eventually building their way to, of course, a base raid and then the missile bunker, like big finale that they want to get to, and it's crazy. It really does deliver on like every single thing you've seen in one of these movies in like 90 minutes.
Yeah, and they break it all up into these chunks where there is the part where. So yeah, they've gone stealthy mission through the jungle. They've gone, you know, straight up open fire, blasting guys with grenade launchers, and it's a great image when a couple of the crew are getting rescued by the rest of them, who all arrive on Kit's three-wheeled motorbike at the same time, and they got like 10 people on the thing. And they all pile off and start blasting everybody. But they get through all of that. They get through, you know, the point where before this base where there's, you know, a bridge that's guarded by these machine gun nests that Sammo has to get into, and that has a bit of a World War II movie feel of like, you know, we're at this bridge and we have to get across it, and we have to engage with this certain death scenario.
Yeah, it's like the bridge on the River Kwai, like kind of thing, right? Yeah.
Yeah, which again has that real feel of like a British World War II movie of like how are we gonna cross in this extremely disadvantageous position, and then we get through to the base at the end, and it kind of feels in that whole range, we end up kind of getting all these references to different movies and their tones. Like you get the very strong like Dirty Dozen kind of influence. You get the British Bridge over the River Kwai kind of influence. You get the very strong Rambo First Blood influence of the going or the First Blood Part 2 going back into Vietnam kind of thing.
Yeah, I was like, how do we take the Vietnam War drama that like wins Oscars, but we make it just the most like maximalist, colorful spectacle of violence? Yeah.
And there's like Deer Hunter references. There's like a distinct Indiana Jones vibe at some of the points as well, I think, where they get through the jungle.
The missile silo almost looks like a Ken Adam like Bond layer.
Yeah. When it got to the end, I was like, we're into the James Bond phase now, where you have that like massive indoor set with all the like sculpted rock. The sculpted rock.
Yeah, it really does feel like Sammo was like, if I'm gonna change it up from what my style is, I'm gonna do like a greatest hits of what like every sort of like Western action product looks like, but I'm gonna do it my way, and I'm gonna make like the best version.
And it works really well having that giant factory at the end or whatever, like the warehouse, and having all that space. It works well with having the final fight set up that way because they love doing their wide shots, and that is kind of when they've been doing martial arts, but it's been more close quarters a little bit more. And with this, they expand everything, and you start to see the fighting that you normally see from Sammo Hung and Jackie Chan movies, where it's like that
because
wide
this whole
shot.
time you've had guys who were physically capable of doing that stuff, but they were like, how do I flip onto a boat of a guy with guns and explode it with a grenade, which is not stuff you usually see a Sammo Hung character have to do or have to reckon with. Like, and there was part of me that was a little disoriented even watching this. I was like, man, it feels like a little bit of a waste of Corey Yun to have him there and have him just like shooting a machine gun or something like that, like something that you could imagine any American actor doing. I would have liked to have seen a little bit more of what he's capable of doing, even though again I do think that Sammo is doing it well, and I think he is making, like, if this is his Rambo movie, the sequences are still fantastic. It's just one of those things where you're like, it's not what I'm used to going to a Hong Kong movie for. And so even though the details are there, like there are enough bizarre details, enough like slow motion kung fu flipping and kicking even in those sequences that you definitely have a lot of fun, like Sammo leapfrogging or killing a guy with a fucking leaf, or some of the gags with like the machete and whatnot. But yeah, you get to this finale and you're just like, hell, this is what you come for when you're sitting down to watch a Sammo Hung movie, a Hong Kong movie. You are like, I want to see two guys absolutely going at each other with just their feet. And what can those guys do? And man, do they do some crazy stuff in this.
Oh yeah, it's unbelievable. And again, this is when they start to really show off their martial arts skills. This is when you're seeing these like high kicks, and there's one in particular that I love where they go from a big wide shot where you're seeing all of the movements that both the Laughing General and who's the other fighter at this point? I think it's the emo bangs guy, but I can't remember his name. But he's got these emo bangs the entire time. But anyway,
that's Yoon Biao, I think. Okay, who was a regular. He was part of like the Sammo Hung like stunt team. He's in a lot of his movies.
Okay, for sure.
Well, he was also a member of the group at the Peking Opera Academy. So he had also known and trained with Sammo and Jackie since they were kids.
Oh, okay, yeah, because I mean, and you can tell too. This one move that they do with the wide shot, they're fighting, and then he kind of has his knee up in almost a crane position, but they're very close, and then he kicks it all the way straight up and kicks the guy right in the chin, and they put the camera right above both of their heads so that you can see the impact and him like move his chin up and everything. It's just it's an amazing way of kind of just showing the impact and adding some style to the already unbelievable martial arts that you're seeing. And it's also really, really hard looking. Like when they kick somebody into a wall or something, they're getting these shots where they are flinging them back at full speed into like concrete steps and everything like that. It's really painful looking.
Oh, they're really throwing. Like the giggling general that you're talking about, played by Yun Hwa, who is also, scattered all throughout lots of. I think he was famously Bruce Lee's stunt double in some of his early films. And
he was also, funny enough, for some reason, there's so many people who worked on Mr. Vampire in this, and I think that's because Sammo produced that movie. But this guy in particular was the vampire in Mr. Vampire, who everyone notes for being a very annoying character. And it's very funny in here that he's so like maniacally giggly, and all of the fact that he's doing like splits work and like fan work while in like a Dr. Evil outfit and just using the crazy length of his legs during his fight, like against Rat, it's a fantastic fight.
Yeah, and his kind of like pristine image, he goes with the style of his fighting too. Like everything is super clean and straight legged, and it just
because you expect him to be the general who makes all the people do his dirty work. You wouldn't expect him to be as skilled as he ends up being, and Sammo almost treats it like a gag that he's actually like the best fighter in the army. He's the guy who needs to take Rat and Sammo on like as a 2-on-1 type to finish him off.
And that he's
and again does feel like a Bond villain.
Yeah.
Yes.
And there's no, and I like that he's got no real motivation or character. Literally, he's just like really good at fighting, and he does the little laugh, and that's kind of it. He's just kind of this force of nature that's telling everybody else to do the dirty work, and he doesn't have like a rousing speech or anything like that. He just is super fucking good at fighting and could ruin their entire mission. It's awesome.
Yeah. So those fights are fantastic. Like by the time you're hitting the end, you are hitting like all of Sammo's like main dudes who were part of his stunt crew, the guys he really trusts to deliver a really, really fantastically choreographed, like multi-level, complicated sort of situational fight that then Sammo can control through the space and the editing and, the fluid sort of camera movement and photography and just the sharpness and the speed of what those guys are capable of as athletes, and Sammo's ability to shoot what they're capable of is massive. But one of my favorite aspects of this entire fight is that it still maintains at least a little bit of the tone that he set up. So there are weird and gruesome details throughout this, like Sammo going up to when the Cambodian girls decide that they want to betray them and they want to keep the missiles so that they can use them for their army. And Sammo just goes, no, I'm going to chop your arm off with a machete. And then that girl continues the rest of the sequence, and including her fights with one arm.
Yeah.
Which is just a great bit of choreography that Sammo had to be like, okay, you need to specifically learn one-armed fighting in order to be able to do your fighting.
There's a part where she's basically just got a nub and a knife, and that's what she's fighting with, and it's
so good. And she kills
awesome.
it. That fight is fantastic. Like, it's so good. Yeah. And then there's another part, I think, where Rat like eliminates one of the guys by stringing him up with like a chain and literally hanging him in front of the other guys.
Which the details of it afterwards, like, because eventually they get to a giant lab explosion and all of that, but as they're doing the lab explosion, it cuts back to it, and you can see the hanging bodies still there. So they keep those details within the setting and kind of just reminding you how ruthless this whole thing has been. And I also like the little detail when they're fighting the laughing general, where he eventually does get a hit on him, and he does like a drop kick to the face, and it breaks his glasses and makes the entire side of his face purple. And it's the first time he kind of seems like, unclean or whatever. He's just like not the pristine image that he's been carrying himself as the whole time. So yeah, there's some really amazing stuff in this finale, and it goes on and on, which I love. When a lot of these things I've found with Sammo Hung has like extended finales on purposely. So there's always like 3 mini bosses that go into the final boss fight kind of thing. It just keeps going. It's great.
And like we were saying earlier, much more brutal than a lot of other Hong Kong movies, where the way that Yun Hwa's character gets killed is by having a grenade stuffed into his mouth. And the other characters roll away, and they cut to a wide shot of like a full body
dummy
explosion.
fucking chunks.
It's crazy.
They're doing looks like the scene from Scanners, but it's the whole top half of his body.
Yeah, yeah,
crazy.
And I was even thinking when they put the grenade in his mouth, my brain, even after seeing this, was like, okay, I can't remember if they go this far, with just everything else I'm used to from Sammo. And sure enough, just big dive, wide shot, explosion. It's truly unbelievable, and that's what sets off kind of the whole lab going off and the escape and everything.
Yeah, well, because that's what their mission was. They kind of killed two birds with one stone. They were like, yeah, we're here to blow up this missile bunker. We're not here to like retrieve it and bring it back to the Americans. They literally just want to blow it up so that the Vietnamese army can't use it. And which kind of leads to the ambiguous note that the movie kind of ends on, where like those guys escape the cave and they dive out of like through the waterfall as it's like erupting behind them and all of that. And they literally get out, and you don't really get the full implication that like they're going to get picked up and they're going to get their reward, because as they were dropping out of the plane, they actually say that, oh yeah, the guy who gave you this mission has like been killed and like the mission has been canceled, by the way. And the only guy who knew that was one of the guys who died. So they get out and they go, well, I guess we cleaned up, we did America's dirty work for them. And you get one character just being like, this is America's fault. They got us into these idiot fucking America. Go to hell, America. Go to hell, America. Yeah. Fucking America. And then the one guy's like, well, where have you decided you wanted to go? He's like, well, I mean, America, of course. And it's literally a helicopter shot, like a romantic 80s like synth canto pop song plays, and that's just it. It literally pulls away from them, and you're just like, okay.
Yeah, you're like, I hope they figure it out. Good Lord. I hope, and the
I hope they get paid.
Not on their side.
And they get citizenship.
It's hard to say. And
they went through a lot of hell to not get that shit.
Yeah, and I do love too the whole, like, you have that romantic kind of 80s ballad going off, and instead of just credits, they have a complete highlight reel of all the action and death that you've seen. And so but you're hearing it over a ballad. I loved it. Again, he's just kind of doing two different things at the same time, and somehow, because it's Sammo, it works, or you just accept it.
Yeah, he was like, how do I fit in the thing where you get like Jackie, how he sometimes like sings over his credits, and exactly. That's kind of the tone that he was looking for.
The Vietnam War.
It is Sammo singing on the song at the end.
Oh,
is it?
My God, that's amazing.
I
love these guys.
Sammo, Yun Bao, and Joyce Gadenzi are all singing on that song at the end. And the name of that song, A Condor's Mission.
Oh, hell yeah.
So true.
That's so awesome. I love that.
I was not familiar with Joyce Gadenzi, and I'll have to get a hold of She Shoots Straight, which looks very cool, which she's in. But yeah, like looking her up, I see that, because I was like, oh, she's an interesting looking woman for like Hong Kong cinema, and looked it up, and she was like born in Hong Kong to a Chinese mother and an Australian father.
Oh, okay.
There you go. The Australian connection.
There's the connect. Yeah. That's awesome.
And we've got another Australian connection in the next movie as well.
Oh boy, look at this. Andrew knew.
This was the plan. You're just bringing the Australians to the people.
Yeah. But maybe pivoting towards the reductive rating round, I think, on Eastern Condors. I had a blast with this. This was an incredibly solid to maybe even a high for me. When I was writing about it, we haven't mentioned it yet, but the only other movie I've ever seen that mixed like sort of what you imagine sort of like the American Vietnam War drama to be, and like full-on Hong Kong style, tonally wacky sometimes style and set pieces, but obviously incredibly dangerous stunt craft and destructive stunt craft that really it has a lot of weight to it, was John Woo's Bullet in the Head, which was very much like the heroic Bloodshed version of The Deer Hunter. But the thing about Bullet in the Head is that is just as much, this is the one that doesn't have all the stuff that got cut out of this movie. That's the one that's like a friendship drama almost first, and then the expressiveness in the John Woo style obviously is through the pageantry of the action. These characters feel so many things. Their environments literally start to explode. That's like the John Woo style. And so this, to me, because it has so much of the character cut out of it, and it's doing the more economical men on a mission, style narrative structure, it does end up feeling more like the heroic Bloodshed version of like Rambo or like Missing in Action. And so it's definitely in a trashier register, I would say, but it does feel knowing. It does feel like Sammo is familiar with what the American action like war movie product is and what it, needs to deliver on in order to be entertaining. I watched a fantastic interview that's included on the Criterion Blu-ray with him for this, where he basically says that like, first and foremost, I always watched my movie as like an audience member. I was someone who was like, am I doing something fun? Am I doing something funny? And there are tons of moments where you think, is that like a deliberate joke? And it is. And one, for example, in this that I didn't realize until researching after was the bit about there's characters who keep calling the Cambodian guerrilla soldiers like not very attractive. And it's one of those things where you're like, is that just dated like Hong Kong humor or something like that? Or dated, 80s humor in general? And it was like, no, Sammo was like, I thought it would be like, it would very much annoy the women, and that there were he said in the industry, there were a lot of people who thought like women couldn't be as action stars, which he thought was ridiculous because he was like Michelle Yeoh and some of the movies that he produced, like Cynthia Rothrock. And, like he produced a lot of female-led action films. And so he was like, part of the joke was that this is a, sort of a Hong Kong male audience member being like, this woman, underestimating these women, And so Sammo was someone, that's why I watch this and I go, when I see the parts that feel like almost a parody of an American action film because of the level of gruesomeness or the level of ridiculousness, part of me thinks that Sammo knows exactly what he's doing, and he's just finding a way to do what he loves, which is stunts. He always said his philosophy was stunts are the universal language. Everything that you can say in a movie can be said in a stunt. And if there was a movie that ever felt like all you needed is to string together a bunch of incredibly talented stuntmen and put them into a series of ridiculous war sequences you've seen in other movies, but you've not seen funneled through the Hong Kong sensibility, this is like the most extreme version of that. And every single element of how he shoots it, how he choreographs it, how he stages it, both when he's having people do kung fu flipping and kicking and doing an incredibly extended and fantastic multi-level like actual kung fu fight sequence is fantastic. But honestly, even the stuff where I got a little bit like, oh man, Corey Yun and Yun Wu Ping, really, are they just going to do like machine gun toting squib heavy like war sequences? They're just going to fire guns and scream. And I was just, there's enough craft going on in those sequences as well that I was like, no, this is fun. This is ridiculous. I loved watching the ladies knife a dude in the ass. I loved violence with coconut leaves. I loved the child soldiers playing fucking Russian roulette and the gross gore gags of machete dismemberments and grenades stuffed into people's heads. Like this, all of this in 90 minutes. It is an unbelievable merging of exactly what you expect when you hear of Sammo Hung does the Dirty Dozen. It delivers on everything people told me that it would. So easy for.
Yeah, me too. I really love this movie. I just think it is pretty wild, the tonal shifts that he takes here. But again, I just think that Sammo has this charm that makes you, even if you wouldn't call it perfect control, you just kind of accept it. It is very strange to go from like an actually emotional death that is also being turned into a joke at the same time, cut to him hopping from rooftop to rooftop with a machete and actually cutting limbs off. There's just like there's these cartoonish elements mixed in with this actual all these images that you've seen from other war actioners that you've seen, especially in the American realm, that it just feels so. It feels like something you've seen before and wholly unique at the same time. It's very strange, but I love all of the tonal shifts. Every time I feel whiplash in this, it's a very positive thing. Just a couple things I wanted to point out, I guess, before we wrap it up. But at the end, I do think that he's aware, like you were saying, Josh. It does feel like he's kind of like he's like cursing America and then saying he's going to return there. It's kind of like within those movies that we talk about, there's this almost accidental honesty. Even if the movie is pro-America, it feels like they go too far to a point where they're revealing themselves a little too much. And it seems like he's kind of playing on that a little bit. And it's also that whole classic thing of like, hey, we're America, we've put ourselves into trouble, and now we're going to go back and save the day, even though we've put ourselves there, kind of thing. And I think he's playing with that a lot. So it's very darkly humorous, I would say. And I do like that he has to kind of find different ways to use the martial arts as defense against guns, because he's not normally dealing with it too much unless it's like handguns in a cop movie or something like that. But again, most of those times he's disarming guns so that they can go into the martial arts. With this, he's just enjoying it. There's even a shot where Sammo Hung has like a freeze frame as he's Ramboing a machine gun, just screaming at the top of his lungs, and then it freeze frames as he's doing it, and the screaming and the shooting continues in the audio, and it's just like Sammo is losing himself, becoming Rambo, or this like American killing machine. It's very interesting, a very interesting image. But I also really like the part where he again is mixing the martial arts with the war stuff, where he jumps from the cliff holding the 2 grenades into the truck, and because he's holding the 2 grenades, they can't shoot him, and so he kind of holds them hostage that way. And then to mix in the war with the martial arts, they have the rebel leader, and I believe it's I can't remember his name right now, but he's the guy with the emo bangs. They kind of hold on to the truck and do these like dive rolls into the posts so that they can infiltrate the camp. And again, it's just all these mix of styles put together is very cool and unique. And honestly, I can't name many other films that you can see this in. So I couldn't recommend it more, especially if you like both of these genres. And the one thing I also wanted to mention, this is kind of just a side note, but I realized that have you guys ever seen Mr. Nice Guy with Jackie Chan? Because I'm realizing
not.
Okay, because I'm
Filmed in
realizing
Melbourne, Australia.
Sorry.
Filmed in Melbourne, Australia. It was,
really?
it was shot in this a bunch of it, like the whole opening sequence is shot in Melbourne Central, which is like this big shopping center in the sort of central business area of Melbourne. And I used to work in this office building that's like right on top of there and on top of the train station. So very fun to see like the late 90s iteration
Sammo
of that
loved
place
Australia.
on film.
He married a half Australian woman.
Yep.
That's
Jackie Chan also had a relationship with Australia too, because he spent time in Canberra, the city I live in, when he was very young, because his parents worked at the worked for the ambassadors. What's the word? Embassy. His parents worked in the Hong Kong embassy in Canberra, so he spent time over here when he was young.
Damn.
So he's always had a love for the city of Canberra.
Oh, that's sweet. I had no idea actually that it was filmed there. But that was one of my first Jackie Chan movies that I ever watched, and kind of fell in love with them, because it was one of the movies that'd be on, the Man Network or the Super Station or whatever it was that would put on all these action movies at 9 p.m. And I never knew that it was directed by Sammo Hung. So I was introduced to Sammo at a very young age, and I had no idea. But yeah, I think this is great. Everyone should check it out. And yeah.
For you, Andrew.
It's a 4 from me as well. I think it's like we're saying, so many interesting disparate elements and influences and nods to different influential things. And it just works really well. It works way better than you think it should. And yeah, despite like the sort of tonal whiplash here and there, it's really surprising how much Sammo really keeps the movie on rails. And when I say that, I guess I'm saying it from the perspective of like a Western audience. Like I realize that, sometimes if I watch a movie that's from like Hong Kong or China or Japan, Hong Kong when Hong Kong was a different country, or China or Japan, and there's maybe like an aspect to the storytelling that isn't clicking with me or feels like it's lost in translation. You know how that happens sometimes, where like the storytelling style of other cultures is going to be different to your own, and you're not always going to like get everything, which is fine. But this just seems like it clicks so well in terms of having all of these influences from like British and American movies and Hong Kong cinema and like James Bond movies, and all these different things get kind of mashed up into something which, if you were to describe it to someone like that, would maybe sound like a huge mess, and it's not. Like it really doesn't take like massive diversions. There's comedy in it. There's some quite surprising violence when Sammo's like lopping somebody's head off with a machete in a wide shot. People's hands getting cut off in front of you, stuff like that. People getting fully gibbed by grenades. And there is the classic like Hong Kong stunt work, both in terms of wide shot choreography, amazing like choreographed kung fu, but also just those staggering shots that you look at and think, God damn, the balls on the people who did this stuff. Like, there's a shot of Sammo Hung jumping from like a very sheer face of rock on the top of a hill.
Oh yeah, into the back of the truck, right?
Just jumping like whatever it is, like 20 or 30 feet down into the bed of this truck. And there's bits like that, or there's scenes where a truck, that same truck, will get blown up by somebody dropping some grenades or whatever, and you can see very, very clearly on the footage half a dozen people jumping out of the bed of a truck and rolling away, and then an explosion going off that absolutely would have vaporized anybody who accidentally got caught in the truck. Like, real, genuinely very dangerous stunt work. That you only really see out of like 80s Hong Kong cinema, that classic Jackie Chan, Sammo Hung stuff where guys are straight up putting their lives on the line for stuff. Like I was rewatching a bunch of Jackass recently, like the Jackass movies and TV show and stuff, and I ended up reading this one of those like GQ long read interviews with Johnny Knoxville, and in the course of talking to him and they talked to Steve-O during this thing as well, and one of them says like, man, it's just crazy that we're all just like walking around, considering all that stuff we were doing, that like all like Knoxville says as they sit down for an interview in this thing, he says, oh, it's all pretty crazy, but I got here on my own and I'm sitting up eating my food like a big boy, so I'm happy. Yeah. And that's I can't help but think that when looking at guys like Jackie Chan and Sammo Hung and Yuen Biao and all these dudes, where I'm
they're
sure,
still here.
well, and like I'm sure that they all have like a bunch of issues at this point in their life that relates to, in Jackie Chan's case, breaking most of your bones. And the same for Sammo Hung. I'm sure these guys have been like injured and all that sort of stuff. But the fact that just none of them got killed or like, permanently disabled by any of the stuff that they were throwing themselves into for years is incredible.
Oh, yeah. And that both of them are still technically doing actioners. Like, they're obviously not doing the same level of stunt work that they were doing or nearly as much of it, but they're still like, they can still throw a kick, which is just, given what we've seen over the last decades, it is truly insane. You're right.
But yes, it's an absolute triumph of somehow managing to pull all of this stuff together. And I would say have it work in a way that is more sort of narratively cohesive than a lot of other like Sammo Hung movies that I have seen.
Well, I think that's going to wrap it up for Eastern Condors. We're going to be right back, and we are going to be going back to the 1960s Men on a Mission era. We're going to be talking about Dark of the Sun. Stick around.
In guns and bare hands of hired heroes. A strike force of crack mercenaries fights the hottest battles in all the blazing hell of today's strife-torn Congo. Dark of the Sun.
All right, we are back, and we are talking Dark of the Sun, the 1968 American Men on a Mission war action film. Actually, it might be British, now that I think about it. It might be British.
Yes,
Men on a Mission war action film, but Western in comparison to Eastern Condors. This one directed by Jack Cardiff, written by, what is it, just right, Ranald? Yeah, Ranald. I thought I misspelt that for a second. I was like, is that supposed to be Ronald? No, it's Ranald McDougall and Adrian Spies, who were adapting the 1965 novel by Wilbur Smith, who wrote a lot of books about African mining trade, and starring Rod Taylor as Captain Curry, the leader of a band of mercenaries on a mission through a war-torn Congo Crisis, Africa, to steal $50 million in uncut diamonds and save, hopefully, a bunch of communities of the small mining town that actually mined it. This is technically, once again, our first time talking about British filmmaker Jack Cardiff, who, before stepping behind the director's chair, however, was a legendary Oscar-winning cinematographer who shot such films as The Red Shoes, Black Narcissus, The African Queen, and later in his career doing photography work on mainstream American studio movies, which is the only time he's ever come up, actually. Conan the Destroyer, which is very funny. That's one of the few times we've ever talked about Jack Cardiff. And also Rambo First Blood Part 2, which it's a funny connection between the two movies there, that it felt like Sammo was kind of doing his version, and Jack Cardiff, literally it's very well known, or very infamous even, that you could say that the guy who shot The Red Shoes also shot Rambo 2. Just one of those funny things that turned out that way. And honestly, and also that you can tell, because when we talked about Rambo 2, we were like, that movie is absolutely stunning and vibrant, and in complete opposition to the kind of ugly tone of that movie.
Every body explosion is just beautiful. It really is.
Every muscle that's covered in sweat as Rambo is fucking exploding a body into chunks with explosive arrows or something. It's what a picture. So regardless, we have spoken briefly before about his astonishing visual poetry behind the camera, even when working on trash. And even if you don't know his name, you've likely seen an image from one of his Powell and Pressburger films, which are among some of the most sort of beautifully artificial and colorful in 1940s movie history. I actually just recently, I think at the end of last year, got the chance to see both Red Shoes and Black Narcissus on BFI film prints. Which was just flabbergasting. So the Technicolor is so lush, the imagery is so sort of impressionistic and so lyrical, borderline surreal when you start incorporating some of the insane lighting choices that he made and the way that he would incorporate matte paintings. There was literally a part when I was watching Black Narcissus, and there was a woman sitting in front of me at a screening who literally gasped at the cut to the high angle shot that's super famous from that movie everyone knows, of the nun ringing the bell and it looking down like the Himalayan mountainside, because that entire landscape is it's a painting. It's completely fake. It was done in a studio. Yet his imagery and that cut to it literally made a woman go like, "Oh my God, this is beautiful. I've never seen anything like that."
That's the noise I made when I watched it. Yeah.
Yeah, like Jack Cardiff is a guy who had that skill behind the camera, which is why it's insane that we are going to be talking about one of the nastiest and pulpiest movies, I think, of the 1960s, which is what he did when he got behind the camera. Because I guess in the 50s and 60s, his credibility as a visual painter was so acclaimed that he was like, I'm actually going to focus on making a career for myself as a director. But it was doing, a lot of the time, it was doing like something like a drama, like Sons and Lovers from 1960, which actually garnered him an Oscar nomination for Best Directing. And then he did a boat adventure movie called The Long Ships, and he did a couple other movies in there as well. But eventually, he did this movie, Dark of the Sun, also known as The Mercenaries, which was cashing in on the popularity, especially in the UK, of the trend of men on a mission films. You had things like The Guns of Navarone. You had, I mean, if you want to include things like Bridge on the River Kwai, which you absolutely can, the Great Escape or The Dirty Dozen. And this came out 1 year, I think, before The Wild Bunch, which was kind of doing that in sort of a bit of a Western context. And so here was a guy who, I don't know exactly what intrigued him to this specific material, because even at the time, it was deemed pretty unpleasant and kind of trashy and pretty graphic material, even for its genre. So just considering his sort of classier reputation as an artist, it's very funny to me that this was something that he was like, this is my next one. I'm going to do this. And he also was going to still do incredible visual work on it. Like I watched this, I think like 5 or 6 years ago when I was going on a Men on a Mission kick, because I was just kind of going through the catalog of what the big ones were. And I kind of wanted to hit the non-Dirty Dozen ones, because I was like, I've heard of those. What's this one? And I literally watched this, I kid you not, because of the poster. And it was because there was a guy who looked like fucking Lawrence of Arabia wielding a fucking chainsaw against a shirtless man while a train exploded behind him. And I was like, well, that looks like literally the greatest movie ever made.
It has a poster where you're like, this is why we make films right here. This is it.
Yes.
It definitely does. And it just has everything that you could ever want. It even has, like, on the left side of the poster, it's got the whole, like, dipping a woman before you kiss her. So we've got romance,
the Gone with the Wind, like,
yeah, exactly. You know what I mean? Chainsaws, war, romance. It's all here, baby.
Yeah. And so I had no idea when I put that on for the first time who had made it, and that it was going to be as like gorgeously photographed as it is. Like, it's a pictorially, just objectively, it's a beautiful looking movie, but the content of this movie is so sweaty, it's so dirty, it's so bloody that even at the time, people were kind of rejected it a little bit. Like, it was like, it's The Dirty Dozen, but like made by a guy who's absolutely tasteless. Like, people literally were like, this is sadistic, this is upsetting, you know. People straight up did call it like revolting. And the screenwriter, Randall McDougall, he had his name stripped from the movie because he had written Mildred Pierce, and he had written like movies for like Alfred Hitchcock before. He was just like, no, I'm going to take, so his name on this movie is Quentin Wordy, as in like he typed QWERTY. Just to cover up the fact that he had worked on something that was being accused of being vile trash. Even some of the actors, even fucking Jim Brown, I think, was the one, because it wasn't Rod Taylor. I think it was Jim Brown was the one who came out and like wouldn't do promotion for the movie, even though he was in The Dirty Dozen. He's part of the reason he was cast in this movie. He was like, nah, this is
just too much.
People are saying that this is like, you know, there's nasty and there's nihilistic and there's the Sam Peckinpah thing. Yeah. And then this takes it to kind of, this has a mean streak to it where you're just like, it's incorporating enough real life gruesomeness that I think people were a little bit like, oh boy, that just makes me uncomfortable.
Is that, you think, why like Peckinpah could get away with it in the sense of like the context of the movies he would make? They were more,
well, to be fair, Peckinpah was kind of slam too at the time.
Sure, for sure.
Not just, necessarily.
I guess this one seems just so much less popular. Like, it's got the 3.6 K on Letterboxd entry. It seemed like it was suppressed because of the tastelessness of it, or how people perceived as tastelessness. So yeah, I'm just curious as to like what exactly would be the difference. And it does feel like, because they're dealing with some real history, that would be a major part of it. Not that Peckinpah doesn't. It's just that, I guess, like when you do a Wild West thing, it's still very, there's a lot of fiction involved in that. You could say it's about a specific time and maybe represents certain characters amongst American history, but it doesn't feel as connected as something like this, maybe.
I think there's just something to be said that, because when we're going to get into the narrative of this, but this is functionally like if you were to do one of those like Cowboys and Indians, like Western actioner style thing. And I think that Peckinpah was able to get away with that because there was enough distance from that history, and there was enough sort of cinematic mythology from those old Westerns that people, I think, did divorce them from the history, even if they were ideologically saying things that are quite similar to what this film says or something like that. Sure. I think setting that kind of adventure story in a real life war film that was so recent. Because keep in mind, the Congo Crisis happened in like 1960 to 1965, and people were pretty troubled by it. So the idea of being like, dude, what if there was like a cowboy and he was having, doing a buddy film, but you were watching, like, in the background there was just like general rape and torture and the vibe of genocide is something that maybe made people go a little bit like, I'm a little uncomfortable with that.
Right. And do you think like the turn of this character that he eventually takes just wasn't enough for people? Because it's like, it kind of happens at the tail end when he's like, I'm going to turn myself in and that kind of thing. It's just like, we've seen so much already before that last minute decision.
Yeah. Some people maybe just didn't even make it to that stuff.
Yeah.
But Andrew, was this your first time watching this one as well, or had you seen this one before?
No, this was my first time watching this. Very, like you said, very beautiful movie. Yeah, I think, like you were saying, you really could just transplant the entire setting to a Cowboys and Indians type. We need to go here and get this stuff and come back. Yeah, like I did expect it, I think, to be a lot more kind of, what's the right way to put this? I expected it to be much more racially charged in a very black and white, pardon the pun, kind of way. But it was much more nuanced than I was expecting. In terms of both discussions of like mercenary activity in somebody else's country, race relations, how colonizers from different countries view themselves and view each other.
I absolutely agree. The first time I watched this, I was like, oh yeah, I can see why people maybe think like the depiction of the sort of African revolutionary uprising or rebellion stuff is quite troubling, because we will get into it. But like some of the sequences where you watch the rebels like break through, it is handled with the same kind of tact that like native on settler violence was in like a really retrograde Western. Like it is just like a nasty army of boogeymen who want to rape and torture everything they see for fun.
Yeah, and there's really
site.
I don't think they really have a character that tries to be the personification.
There's
of the
no
group
humanizing, even like there's one good one. It's like, so
it's just
on
a group
that
every
level,
time, an ambush essentially.
Yeah, so it's pretty troubling in that specific case, but beyond that, it is also one of the more like brutal visions of like what war profiteering looks like and feels like, even if you think that about those people. It's just like you still don't feel good. Like these violent foreign outsiders and mercenaries who come in to do this mission, they really don't like even pretend or dress up their actions to be like anything else. A good portion of this movie is them figuring out how comfortable they are with collaborating with a literal ex-Nazi for most of the movie, and being like, are we the baddies? Like kind of moment that they have. And I will say too, as they go through their mission, the civilian body count on this movie is absolutely absurd.
Yes.
It's like
crazy,
one of
right?
the most, like, you do not include that unless you know exactly what it is that you're doing and what it is that you're saying about these guys. Because like, you kind of like the two main guys played by Rod Taylor and Jim Brown. They're playing this Captain Bruce Curry and his and Sergeant Rufo, who are two mercenaries who land in the Congo with presidents from the then President Ubi to basically let them pass through the UN peacekeeping barrier, to essentially let them, to send them on the mission through rebel territory for an ostensible sort of like humanitarian rescue of this mining town community that the sort of like mining company owner says that's what they're doing. And then they also throw in, if you could also retrieve the $50 million in mined diamonds that the mining company owner and the president whose regime is currently being threatened by all of these rebels, they definitely have no interest in those diamonds for themselves, of course. But if you could just, think about it while it's there.
Yeah, we really, this is a rescue mission. We promise.
Yeah.
So Rod Taylor, I didn't realize, an Australian actor.
I didn't know that either. I think I only know him from like The Birds. That's what I think about him when I think of Rod Taylor.
So I was not very familiar with him, but there's you know how you were saying with Eastern Condors that Tarantino had basically straight lifted that first scene of the rebel girls kind of running in to kill some guys before they could make any noise.
This he's even worse about. He plays this at his theater all the time because he straight up admits that he stole so much of Inglourious Bastards from this.
Yeah, and so Rod Taylor's final film role was as Winston Churchill in Inglourious Bastards.
Yep.
And you know, according to Rod Taylor, he got asked to do it. You know, learned that the movie was being shot in Germany, and he said, well, Albert Finney lives in England and has played Churchill a bunch of times, you know, and he's already over there. And according to him, Tarantino replied, if Rod Taylor turns me down, then I'll call Albert Finney.
That's awesome.
And you know, again, you can see that kind of connection with like Jim Brown being in there, who, you know, would have also been in a lot of the movies that form, you know, big influences on Tarantino.
I was really impressed with Jim Brown in this movie, actually, because I like him in The Dirty Dozen, and you know he's fun in Running Man too, which is I think when we previously talked about him, his like career as an actor after the NFL and all that. But I was surprised at how much of like a real character he was given in this movie.
Me too.
Like part of the drama of this movie is a kind of moral and philosophical debate between Rod Taylor, who is very sort of like animalistically violent, as we'll talk about as he gets to the very end, but also his vision of violence as kind of just this tool that is for money making, and it's dispassionate, and you don't really have to think about it, and it's better to actually push it away. It's manly to not think about it. And the Jim Brown character, who is you know, sort of his buddy, and they do form sort of buddy chemistry in the movie, is the one who sees, you know, he has a more sensitive and sort of educated view, I guess you could say, of what violence is. And he sees it as the really viscerally ugly and upsetting thing that it is, but also the means of achieving like a real political goal that you maybe care about. And like, so that's where he kind of goes, sometimes it has value in those specific scenarios, but you shouldn't be, you know, you should always consider the weight of it, I think is kind of the argument he kind of makes towards Curry, who tries to just ignore that fact. And I was just kind of surprised at how much that push and pull between those two characters is something that the downtime of the movie actually cares about and spends enough time with the performances of, that's more of the movie by the end of the movie than anything else. The actual mission and whether they kill the bad guys or not seems kind of less relevant than how sort of how Curry is made to feel due to Jim Brown's character.
Yeah, I think Brown's character really acts as like the conscience of the movie. He's the heart of the movie, and is placed in this interesting way where he kind of has a context and a perspective on all the players that they don't all share. You know, He's described during the movie as coming from the Congo, and he's from Africa, and he cares about and loves his country. He had gone overseas to go to university, speaks 4 languages. You know, he's highly educated. He's philosophical, and he doesn't have like a blind hatred for anybody. He has perspective on everybody, even the displaced Nazi soldier that they're working with, and you know, the reality is that's what would have been happening in a lot of places post World War II.
Yeah,
I saw like what was it? I saw the other day where an American politician or whoever it was talking about how, you know, Donald Trump and these guys, they're like giving up on Ukraine and taking the side of Putin and everything. And he's like, that's not what America's all about. America believes in science and doing the right thing and not teaming up with the bad guys and all this stuff. And I was thinking like, yeah, except for like, you know, all that Operation Paperclip kind of shit. all that stuff where World War II ended, and they said, "We'll let the Nazis come and live here if they've got something
If
to
you're
give,"
smart enough.
you know. Yeah, if we can
you're cool
profit
enough.
from it.
Yeah.
If we can profit from it and there's advantage to be had, we can kind of look past the fact that you're a Nazi, you know?
Yeah.
And that's much more like the gray areas of the reality of the world that we live in. And there's, in this particular case, you know, it's an interesting perspective on both of these characters, because Curry is obviously presented at the start as like the hero of the story. He's an American, but he is a mercenary, you know? When him and Jim Brown hook up right at the start of the film, they go to the bar in this town that they're in. There's some journalists there that have some familiarity with Curry, and one of them starts ribbing him about, you know, being disapproving of mercenaries. And straight away he's just like, "Oh, how about you shut the fuck up?" You know? Like,
Yeah, he has a
how about you
sick
get
way
off
of
my
saying it
case
too
about
that I've never heard anyone else say before, which is "keep your mouth off me because you're not in good enough shape." And I was
Yeah.
like, God damn.
Yeah.
I need to work out so I can use that.
and he's casual about it, and he's charming and is funny. You know, the way he turns to the other guys and goes, "He's mean."
He has a
And-
crazy outfit too. The short cargo shorts and beret combo.
Oh yeah.
That's
Crazy.
a very
Don't fuck
Only
up
a
that
man in
guy.
1968 could pull that off.
yeah. That's a very like 1960s like Australian military / Australian dad kind of look. Those shorts, but with like calf length socks as well, you know. But yeah, like so they kind of position him as theoretically being the hero, but he is also morally ambiguous in the sense that he's here
for
doing
sure.
this for money.
They even describe where he's like, my job as a mercenary really isn't that different than like a businessman, and he negotiates the rescuing of people and the diamonds like it is a business deal. And he talks about how, you know, he wants to be armed with resources and he wants freedom to select his own men and like all of this kind of stuff. And yeah, it to him it really just is a business negotiation. The fact that there's a whole bunch of people in an incredible amount of danger, whereas for Rufo, he's like, yeah, no, I actually think that those people deserve not to get horrifically murdered. And if I can prevent that, I'd like to do that.
Yeah, and in the process of recruiting the people that they need, he recruits his friend and an alcoholic doctor, and he is also
Who he bribes with scotch, which is great.
bribes with a whole bunch of booze, and also they link up with Heinlein, this ex-Nazi soldier who is now working for the local government as, you know, a lieutenant of these local African forces, which you can assume is a role that this particular person would be happy to play, you know, coming into a situation where he's subjugating a bunch of African guys. But
yeah, you know that you're on the good side when you're making deals with a Nazi and the owner of a mining company in like colonizing a country. You're just like, we're in a good spot, right? And it does seem that they bring the Nazi around to make them like feel better about doing the ugly work, but like not being evil about it as this guy is. Because there's a part where he literally goes, "Don't wear that swastika. It makes me forget who I'm mad at." You know? I really. You know?
But at the
But
same
I'm going to
time,
keep working with you, though.
Yeah, exactly. This guy's literally got his little swastika insignia dangling off his shirt front, and this guy knows this about him and knows he's a piece of shit. But he says we need him because he is the leader of this group of soldiers that we need to bring along with us. So. Again, immediately, any ideas of morals about who you're working with and what you're doing get put aside for the pursuit of getting this thing done for money. But it's always Jim Brown's character who's offering like the pragmatism, the view of like, if we want to get this thing done, then we have to do this thing. We have to go with this guy, you know?
Yeah, he's presented as incredibly intelligent right away. I think there's a moment where they're doing the negotiation and someone starts to speak to Curry specifically, and then Rufo interacts with him, and he realizes, he's like, oh, I didn't know that he spoke the language. And he's like, well, he actually speaks 4 languages. And it's kind of this like bigoted assumption that they have of him. And he ends up being like the most intelligent character in the entire movie, really.
Yeah, and he does just sort of continue to. I think as the movie goes on, through we do get the it's a very quick recruitment phase, much like Eastern Condors, because the movie opens with Curry arriving in the Congo. He's got Rufo, Jim Brown's character, with him at the time. They get off the plane, they go straight to see the Prime Minister, who gives them the deal, and then they're off, and they get told
they're getting their Nazi, they're getting their doctor, they're having they have the resources of the Congolese army gifted to them, obviously by the Prime Minister or the President or whatever, and
but they've got 3 days to do it. They've got a very condensed timeline, and they have to leave at like dawn the next morning. So
and they have to put together like a custom like steam engine train, which is an incredible bit of montage when they're just loading it with sandbags and putting like the artillery guns on it, and it's great.
I love the sound design too, because it's not like, you can't call it silent because they are still giving sound design to like the metal clinking together and all of that, but everyone that's yelling over it, you don't hear a single voice. So you just hear the score and the actual train being put together and those sounds. And it obviously just gives an idea of this is loud work, so you can't hear over people yelling. But there's not even a faint like whisper or a reverb design or anything like that with the vocals. It's just like completely wiped out. It adds a kind of cool style, and I guess just this idea that they're hard at work kind of thing, and they're focused.
Yeah, if anyone has ever seen John Frankenheimer's The Train with Burt Lancaster,
totally
unbelievable movie, and this is the stuff that kind of reminded me of that, and just the way that it kind of gets that the sort of procedural machinery of the guys at work, and the steel and the steam and the grime, and getting this together, and just seeing that funneled through Jack Cardiff's like just gorgeous widescreen look, like the location shooting that they did in, I think they shot Jamaica for Africa in this, because that was where they had access to the actual sort of rail, because he wanted an actual fully functional sort of steam engine train that he wanted to shoot all of the actors on and stuff like that. So for that, was why they did. So it's actually going through natural landscapes, and when it gets into that sort of grim episodic sort of war encounter section of the movie, when they're just riding the train in through rebel territory, it has a lot of that like Apocalypse Now, like the boat riding up the river kind of element, but it has the momentum of you are on a barreling fucking train, and it's not slowing down. You guys have a time clock going. You need to complete this mission, and when you go through all of those kind of various encounters they go through, which kind of speed running them, there's the fighter plane one, which is fantastic, and those point of view shots like of like going up the barrels as they're trying to shoot the plane down, and I think it's like a UN peacekeeping plane that's like, what are you guys fucking doing? Don't fucking go in there. And it's like dudes are being flung bloodily off the train, and carts are lighting on fire. Then there's, I think, another one where they spot an assault on a sort of contact's property, which is where they pick up the traumatized woman Claire, played by Yvette Mimieux, and then there's one other one where they stop at the filling station, which is that's maybe one of the most horrible sections of the movie, which is when they run into those two children who say they've not seen any sort of like rebel soldiers, and they go, okay, you guys are free to go then. And then they hear gunshots and they go over, and the Nazi has gunned the two kids down, stating that, it was very possible they were rebel spies who were going to inform on them. And you just get that sad shot of Rufo like carrying their bodies away to bury them, and Curry just being like, put that swastika back on.
Yeah, and you
earned it.
And you can tell too in that moment that it's just like Curry has seen, I mean, he's a mercenary. He's seen death. He's seen a number of things, I'm sure, even possibly worse than death. And he, in that moment, he's completely depleted. Like, it's just like, whoa, this was something I was not really anticipating, even though, I know he's a Nazi.
Well, because unfortunately, they have to buy into the logic of what it is that he's saying. It is value. There is a point to it, but they kind of go, and the look on their faces says it all. And they were like, the mission maybe isn't everything. I don't want dead kids in my thinking about that for the rest of my life.
Yeah, and the decision to not do it, and then he just goes ahead and does it. He takes the authority to do it anyway. There is something there that I think he's going like, oh, well, like if we can't agree on this, then what else are we going to butt heads on down the line? This is already.
Oh, they're gonna butt heads on a lot of stuff. That moment when he's creeping on Claire and the Nazi literally whips out a chainsaw and tries to fucking chainsaw fight him, which I was like, chainsaw fight in 1968. Please, if there's an earlier one, someone tell me. I need to see it. Because I don't know that I've seen a chainsaw fight earlier than this, and it is absolutely insane. The sweatiness and dirtiness and intensity of those close-ups of the Nazi swinging it at him, and of Rod Taylor like stuffing his head underneath the rail and being like, start the fucking train, like we're gonna run this fucking dude's head over. I was like, holy shit.
Yeah, I did not think
wild.
Dark of the Sun was gonna beat out Texas Chainsaw 2 for this ultimate chainsaw battles. It's pretty awesome. And also just like how long these battles will go too. Like he actually really focuses in on the physical conflict of this, and it's very well choreographed and well shot too, which is very interesting. Just him shooting these types of things is really interesting too, because we've seen, it's funny to say that we've seen a couple chainsaw battles in our day on this show now. But this one still has that kind of like, we're still watching a war film. You know what I mean? It's interesting to have that style, but we're still discussing something so outlandish as a chainsaw battle, or even being attacked with a chainsaw.
Yeah, that's where that pulpy adventure kind of thing starts to come into it, where you're like, oh yeah, this is just like a macho adventure sort of like action film on some level, but like the ideas and the setting are so bleak and upsetting that sometimes, again, if it's not quite the same tonal clashing that we're talking about, but it's not entirely dissimilar.
Yeah,
and it's all very grim. And like we're saying though, the timeline that they're given, this really condensed timeline to go and get these diamonds and bring them back, and also these innocent civilians on the train if they can manage it. But the suggestion is basically you're being sent under the guise of a humanitarian mission, but this is what you're actually there to do. And so the time constraint means that there are all these points where they either see some situation where there's some horrible humanitarian crisis unfolding, or people who are going to get killed unless they stop and help them, or people who've been killed and have just been left strewn around and they don't have time to bury them. Guys who've been killed on their own train, and he's like, just toss one over the side every half mile and space them out, And And so there are all these points where they have to really directly deal with the mercenary nature of what they're doing by being confronted with situations where they can either, make a clearer go at the humanitarian effort that they're kind of theoretically meant to be engaged with, or they have to keep going because of the timeline, and they do. And every time they go, this sucks. Now keep going.
Yeah, like the centerpiece sort of set piece of what you're talking about is when they arrive at the mining town, and all the locals are very briefly very happy to see that the rescuers have arrived and they have a train and they're going to be able to exit this place and be okay. But when they get there, they realize they can't leave quite yet because the diamonds need to be retrieved from a vault, and the vault was time locked with no manual reset. So not only do they have a time on the mission, there's a literal time lock on the vault to even get it. It's literally like the clocks within clocks moment here, and they have to wait around for 3 hours before they can leave. And so while they're waiting around, there's a great moment where sort of the Nazi and the doctor are getting drunk at a bar, and sounds like a great setup for a joke, but they're just unloading their guns into the bar and having a good time. And then the doctor briefly gets a shot at redemption by helping a woman sort of give birth to a child at a local missionary. And it is one of the few moments where he goes, look, I'm in the middle of like this mission I accepted for money, but whatever I am, maybe I'm a drunk foolish man, I'm gonna do something right in this particular situation. This woman needs me, and I'm literally the only person in a however many mile radius who could possibly help her. So like that's an example of the humanitarian part kind of taking over. But the risk of being like, we are loading up everyone into the train and we're good to go, the civilians are saved, we've got it, but the vault isn't ready, and which gives them enough time that, you know, Curry is essentially risking the safety of everyone all on board to wait. And that bit when the rebels sort of arrive and it triggers this huge scaled, like incredible spectacled imagery of the machine gun fire going back and forth between the two groups, and the sort of the scale of the action imagery as they start to like get close enough to possibly even like storm the train, and there's a massacre going on, and you can just see Curry just like waiting for that vault to unlock. It finally opens. They get it.
Incredible
The
sequence.
guy. It's like the tension of this in both like just like literal logistical terms is fantastic, but then also the moral tension of, obviously, as what you were just laying out, Andrew, is like hugely like, it's like we are deciding between the mission or the people here, and they do decide the mission, and the consequences of doing that is one of the most horrific images in this entire film, because they get on the train. They have all the civilians on the train with them. They look like they're going to get away. They're going to get over a bridge, and one of the train carts gets sort of like decoupled. It gets disconnected due to the mortar fire, I think, of the rebels, and it starts rolling their way back into town. And it rolls their way back, and it's such an extended sequence, literally mined for the terror of it, which is the civilians are screaming, realizing they are headed back to where they were just being attacked from. And by the time they arrive back, it is literally like there are piles of corpses riddled with bullets leaking out of this cart. The people inside are screaming, realizing they are being led back to some sort of torturous death of some kind. And people inside the train literally are like, I should maybe think about just shooting myself.
Which they
There's people throwing themselves out of the train and off the bridge they're crossing rather than go back.
Horrifying.
Yeah, there's
imagery.
one part where
it's crazy.
I think even like a man shoots his wife and then shoots himself. Like it really accents the kind of ambush and the fear that
which is the guy who opened
feeling.
the vault for the diamonds for them too, which is like, you know, like, so like, and Curry has to accept the fact that he's
regrettably
responsible.
has
All
taken
of
the
that
diamonds
happened.
with him.
Yes. Yeah.
And there's even which is cool. I think this is the same part too, where they add. I think it's Curry's character as well. He does kind of like there's a stunt work where he jumps from one of the carts that gets derailed to the one that isn't, and then that cart is the one that goes off. So just that even
what a crazy
conscious
stunt.
decision, and for it to also incorporate a stunt while it's doing it is like, this is a great sequence. I thought this was amazing. And also, again, the location work, like actually being on rails, seeing an actual bridge that they cross and everything as people like dummies are being flung off into the river. Like it's wild. It's pretty crazy.
I was really surprised by some of the stunt work in this, in terms of people like, leaping off the roof of structures onto a moving train, like leaping off of the veranda of a building into like the bed of a Jeep. Like a lot of very cool jumping from serious heights into like a wooden structure. Like the Sammo Hung stunt that I was talking about before, where he jumps off a sort of cliff face into the back of a truck. Like the angle that it's shot from, I think is reasonably safe to assume is obscuring like some crash mats in the bed of the truck, you know? And then they sort of instantly cut to a shot inside the truck and him landing inside the truck. But like it doesn't diminish in any way from the insanity of the jump that he's taken before that point. And also, what if he fucking misses the moving truck he's jumping into, you know? Like, so it doesn't diminish from that in any way. But in this case, watching the stunts in this movie, no one's jumping onto any mats or anything. There's like zero cushioning or like margin for error on any of this stuff.
It's that 60s rules, like for stunt work, it seems, where it honestly, sometimes I see some of this stuff and I'm like, I just know they went, okay, do it, action. And they just hoped that the stunt guy, you know, didn't get hurt, and
don't break your legs.
The shots, like there's even a really crazy shot, and I'm sure they had enough safety protocol for this to work and everything. But it's during the Nazi and Curry fight, and it's at a point where Curry gets the one up on him, and he's holding him on the train tracks, like his head, and they start to ever so slightly move the train towards his head, and the shot looks like he could, if that guy just cranks the throttle 1 inch too many, it looks like that actor is completely being squashed. It's pretty crazy, to be honest. So yeah, there's a couple moments in this movie that I was like, holy hell, I wasn't expecting this kind of danger in that regard. So.
Yeah, well, and that's what's helpful is like stuntcraft gets you the feeling of like that weight and that danger, and it is truly fantastic when it's merged with content that does. You're like, one, these characters are meant to be in an exciting, dangerous scenario, yes, but the horrifying levels of consequences and violence to the tension of what these guys are doing, I think, is what just elevates that weight even further for you, because you do really just go, damn, they really just like, they might as well have lit that train cart on fire filled with people, and it would have had the same result as what they decided to do. And it results in them having, as Andrew just pointed out, having to go back there for the diamonds anyway, because the diamonds were stuck on that cart with the guy.
Right.
There's really that sense. They get to this point really quickly of, hey, this is meant to be a quick in and out mission, and stuff starts going wrong, and it keeps going wrong, and it goes really wrong. Like the number of civilians that they manage to get away with to save is cut down drastically immediately. And all the people that he has sacrificed by standing and waiting for the vault to open instead of going and helping anybody. And he also prevents the mining company guy who's there to get him the diamonds. He prevents that guy from leaving. He turns around when he hears the gunfire and says, "My wife's on that train." And he's like, "Tough shit. Yep. You're here to get these diamonds out for me," And so he prevents this guy from leaving and gets the diamonds. This guy gets the diamonds, runs out. They all get in the car, go and get back on the train. And as soon as they do, Curry is shouting in an unintentional, it's not meant to be funny kind of way, "Get those diamonds into my caboose." Get them in my caboose.
I'm always saying that.
But this guy sees his distraught wife on the train carriage, and he runs over to get to her instead, taking the diamonds with him, and unintentionally sending them right back in to the Congolese rebels. And so, that shot of the train carriage full of civilians rolling back towards them,
so slowly too, oh my god.
and they all just the guys on the part of the train with the engine just have to stand there looking at him and watching him go, and it's particularly
knowing
horrifying.
Exactly what it's going to lead to, which is when they head back into town and they see the imagery of the rebels basically going around just torturing and raping and lighting people on fire. And this is the stuff where you kind of go a little bit like, oh boy, this thinks that anyone who was trying to overthrow any sort of African government who was maybe serving the forces of capitalists and Nazis is like worse than, or at least as bad as the Nazi character, because man, the imagery here is really, really horrible. And it does make you, like the fact that they do like a funny little routine in order to get through it, that did tonally clash for me a bit, because I was like, Rufo's just like carrying Curry on his back, like pretending to be one of the rebels. And once they land there, they do the most, Tarantino-esque thing you could possibly imagine, which is that they just grab MP40s and literally just start machine gunning a sea of rebels and leaping onto the pool tables with the diamonds and shooting and exploding their way out through just intense amounts of senseless slaughter and carnage, essentially.
It's something straight out of like one of those fake movies that he made in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, where DiCaprio's just like taking out the Nazis. It's very much like that, and I mean, I enjoyed it, to be honest, but the context of it obviously is like questionable in that sense. But when you're just looking at the filmmaking, you're like, this is art. This is brilliant. Look at these MP40s just popping off. These boys.
But I guess like even then, if you were to really try and break down what the movie is putting forward, which is does the movie or does the script think that this is good?
Yeah,
And
that
I'd say,
point, that's
No,
true.
well,
It kinda just
that's
sets
just
up
it.
chaos
Is that
at this point.
is
Like,
that on one level they are horribly depicting, you know, like this rebel group in like a horrifyingly racist way to be like, and they're still being like. They probably, this is still not like what our protagonist characters are still doing is still incredibly troubling, even if you think that that's what these rebels are.
Yeah.
And you're just like, this is still like really upsetting.
I think,
stuff that they have to they have to wrestle with.
I feel like at
Well, I
this
guess
point it's pure chaos kind of thing, and it even like, and we'll get to it if we aren't already, but it even kind of leads into that incredibly long chase and death sequence between the Nazi and Curry. It just feels like at this point there's almost like it feels so long that it feels like Curry has to prove himself after doing all these horrifying things and being amongst all this chaos of just death and whatever else.
And it is also acknowledged as like top-down chaos, that it is like I love that speech that Curry gets, that, and Rod Taylor nails that line where he goes, "The gun is Chinese, paid for by Russian rubles. The steel probably came from a West German factory built by French francs. Then it was flown out here on a South African airline, probably subsidized by the United States."
Yeah. He's just like, and we're out here getting paid, okay? That's what we're here for.
Yeah, no one here is doing
he's
the
like,
right
I'm
thing.
meaningless.
I'm a paid hand doing a dirty job, and you know, I'm just a bystander is how he views it. Whereas like Jim Brown is trying to tell him that like, dude, like this is like violence and silence. That's just the Curry way. Like I really do, you know, think that, you know, you need to feel something. You need to be human. Like this, continuing to participate in this cycle of nonstop carnage is going to remove the human part of you that cares about other people. And you know, and he even at one point describes him as being tough and mean, and he won't give you that extra part of himself you need, and it hurts. He's talking to him about him like he's like a life partner or something. It's very great, and I love that the Claire character is like, so what do you do? He's like, I hurt because he's worth it. It's so romantic almost.
It is.
Beautiful friends. Well, and this, so I guess to speed run the events that lead us up to the climax of the movie. After going back into town to get the diamonds, in a kind of vain attempt to keep the humanitarian mission going, they also attempt to steal several cargo trucks and a fuel truck, so that they can continue to ferry on the sort of locals that they were picking up and trying to rescue. They manage to steal the trucks while they create the diversion of killing dozens of people. So they managed to do that, but on the way out, the fuel truck gets blown up, putting them straight back into this situation of we're still completely fucked because there's
we're
only
stuck
so far
hiding in the
we're gonna be able to
jungle
get.
waiting for the rebels to find us, and so Curry is the one who goes solo, kind of looking
He
for
has to go
a
and get some
contact
more
who can.
fuel.
Yeah.
But in the process of that as well, you know, of going to get some more fuel, he goes to check on his doctor friend as well and confirms that he has indeed died, which is very upsetting to him. But you know, it's kind of it's felt that he did it for a reason. I think the movies
He got his shot at redemption.
Yeah, the doctor found redemption in the end. But as he's heading off, he says, you know, give me the fuel out of the trucks and I'll go and I'll get some more fuel and bring it back here and everything. And there's a bit of disquiet because of the sense that he might just fuck off and leave them all there, you know? And he's very, very offended by this suggestion. And he sort of churlishly gives the diamonds to Rufo and says, well, you keep these then, and I'll just go with someone else if you think I'm such a piece of shit. He says in a very passive-aggressive way. Rufo goes off, comes back with a bag and says, oh, there's some food and some supplies and stuff in there for you. And he's like, well, I won't need it. I won't be gone for long, bitch. And he leaves. And it is at this moment that the Nazi decides to strike and try and get these precious diamonds.
Nazi mode.
He goes Nazi mode. He really wants all these diamonds for himself, as he's been telegraphing pretty clearly for the whole movie. and he kills our beloved Rufo, the heart and soul of the movie.
Dude stabs him with a machete through the back of the truck, which was just such a heartless way of doing that.
Bayonets him through the back, through the cloth cover of the truck. And he kills the character who really was like the heart of the movie, and who operated as like, you know, the moderating conscience for Curry. He was the one who stepped in several times and was like, we have to do the right thing. We have to do the things that we need to keep this mission
He's the
going.
one who stopped him from killing the Nazi earlier in the movie.
Stops him from killing the Nazi earlier in the movie for two reasons, I think. One of which was we need this guy to command these other troops. If we don't have him, we lose that authority. But also, he's kind of appealing to... You know, he's appealing to his soul. He's saying if you just mindlessly kill this guy, you're as bad as him, you know. And so
So what does Curry do when that conscience is stripped from the movie, Andrew?
So Curry realizes on his way back with the petrol and everything that Rufo had left the diamonds with him, and that the Nazi doesn't have the diamonds at all. He has crafted a raft out of bamboo and is making his way down a river towards the Rwandan border.
It's pretty resourceful, to be honest.
The shot of him as like Curry is, you know, getting the Jeep and trying to find him and getting the information of his direction and everything, that they just keep cutting back to him like balancing on the raft down the river is so funny.
It is actually pretty goofy. It's
so
like cutting back to just Curry ripping in a fucking like Jeep through the jungle at
like
high speeds, and then you just cut back to a Nazi like trying to just balance on like a raft.
Like it literally is like he's standing there so still, and I could tell that he's like, oh god, don't wobble over.
He looks like he's paddleboarding.
Exactly.
But so when, you know, he comes back still with the diamonds, and he sees his beloved friend who had, you know, taught him so much lying there dead, and you know,
he literally grabs a knife and goes, I'm gonna cut that Nazi's head off.
Yeah. But the girl is like, it's not what Rufo would have wanted, quite correctly, you know. But at this point, he is in full animal rage mode, and he doesn't give a fuck anymore. He wants to put an end to this guy. He's wanted to kill him for the whole movie anyway, but like he's hated him for the whole film, but now he's truly pushed over the edge. Like I think in this moment of the film, that's you know, the last of his humanity being stripped away from him. It's his connection with humanity and with seeking to understand other people and having someone reach out to him with care, you know. And all he sees is that's been taken away from him, and he goes absolutely animal mode. He gets in this Jeep, and the shots of him, or you know, the stunt driver who is whipping this Jeep down like
he's
rocky
off-roading
inclines.
like crazy, like through mountains, through the shallow river. When he catches him, he's literally almost driving through the river to be like, I'm gonna fucking nail this guy.
Straight over rocks and everything. The driver is getting whipped around like nobody's business. He's really going for it.
My favorite element of the whole thing, too, is like when he finally catches up to him. I thought, because he's been in the Jeep for so long, we've seen him go through so many different terrains at this point. It really is like a long chase sequence in a sense. And then he finally gets to him, and he just dives off of the moving Jeep and tackles him.
Doesn't even
to start a fight. It's beautiful. He's just like, I just needed this to get to you. Now I got my bare hands, baby. It's so...
And the actual sequence is even strenuous itself. Like the way that they have to go down the vines through like the waterfall and the rocks, and when he gets down there and he literally just starts breaking his arm on the rock, like fucking smashing it, like boosh, boosh. Yeah. And when he eventually gets all the way down there and he gets the knife out, when he stabs him, man, it's the thunk of the blade just going
over and over,
like over and over again, and the way the camera pans to the trail of blood like flowing downstream through the waterfall and stuff.
Yeah,
I was
Jurassic
like,
Park
God
mode, baby.
damn.
With the Nazi screaming for mercy, like screaming, begging him not to do it, and like I found that whole pursuit and fight scene and everything almost comparable to like the Roddy Piper fight in in They Live. With
it just keeps going.
It just keeps going. These dudes beating the piss out of each other, and these guys are doing it over hill and dale. Like they go like off the side of a cliff down a bunch of vines, kicking each other as they go down, like into water, over rocks. Like it's crazy how far they're going, and like the stunt actors and the actors themselves are absolutely throwing themselves into it. They are hurling themselves.
Yeah, and it just shows you the determination of Curry at that point. Like he's like at the point when the Nazi tried to kind of, you know, shimmy down the vines into the waterfall, and he just follows him so that they have to keep fighting on the vines. I'm like, he doesn't even care if he kills himself at this point. And they make that a point, which I really enjoyed. It wasn't just like, it didn't feel ridiculous. It did feel as if he's just gone off the edge. And if he dies killing this guy, he doesn't care. It's just, this is what he needs to do. At the very least, he needs to avenge his friend. And it's the one good thing that was in his life. So, I loved how insane this is and over the top it is. It really suits the rest of the story with his character.
And there's an incredible moment as well where he's done with this, and one of the Congolese soldiers finds him, and he looks around, and he is like absolutely wild-eyed. Like he looks frenzied, you know? Like he's on his hands and knees, whipping his head around, looks completely crazed. He looks like an animal, you know? And you can see the shock on this African soldier's face at what this man has done and the way in which he's killed this other man. And he proclaims it to be like, he's like, no, I'm not. You know, he says, let's get back to the truck. And he's like, I can't walk with you. You know, I can't be on the same path.
I can't walk. It's
someone.
like someone who can kill like that is like, that's crazy. That's fucked up.
And he brings it back to what Rufo had said earlier about, you know, that's bad magic, what you're doing. That's evil. Like you're committing acts of evil. And so, you know, they go and they do get back into the truck, and they're driving along for a little bit, and he's pondering, and he pulls over to the side and he surrenders himself, saying, I want to be court-martialed for the murder of this Nazi. Words no one has ever said before in the history of the world. But yeah, he says, you know, I want to be court-martialed, and like I think that's his character's moment for redemption as well, is to say...
Yeah, that's his moment of like reflecting and trying to live like the way his friend would have wanted to him to do, and to think of that as like murdering another human being rather than doing what, you know, by the end the movie kind of convinces you is pretty justified violence.
Oh, sure, yeah,
which is
because it is the Nazi
the funniest
guy,
part of the movie is you kind of go, you know, that revenge sequence is pretty cathartic, but then he goes, yeah, I'm still kind of a bad guy though. I probably shouldn't have done
You're
that.
like, but it was really satisfying. Yeah, it is. It does make you kind of feel conflicted in that way, but it is. I really think it's a great character arc for somebody like this. Agree. And I do like also that he says something like, he's like, I'd do it, but I wouldn't like it, which is kind of the first time you think of him as, you almost think of him as completely neutral or just indifferent the whole time, like he's just there for money. But that line does kind of say that this has been eating at his soul this entire time, even though he hasn't really shown it or admitted it or anything like that. But this is, after this, it feels like he can't help but be exposed in a certain way.
Well, yeah, because it's an important moment, because I think it's Jim Brown says it earlier in the movie where I think they're talking about the possibility of what if they were fighting on opposite sides of a war. Because he's like, if you just fight for money, who's to say the rebels don't pay you next week and we're fighting each other next week? And he goes, I think it's Jim Brown is the one who basically goes like, you know, if we were to fight each other, like I'd do it because I'd have to do it, but I wouldn't like it. I wouldn't want to fight you. Yeah. Like, you know, like I have humanity still. And that's the moment where, he in reflecting that and hearing that back in his mind, it does make him think that, man, I killed that guy, but I probably shouldn't have liked killing that guy. You know? Yeah. Makes me a bad person probably, but, if we're maybe pivoting towards the reductive rating round on Dark of the Sun here, it's kind of similar territory for me. Very solid 4. I think that we've gone through it all already, but again, I think this is a movie that it has a couple of contradictions in the sense that it is a really, really pulpy and ultra-violent action-adventure men on a mission movie that is functionally trafficking in the kind of narrative of, a sort of cowboys and Indians sort of like mission, and in terms of how it's depicting the good guys and the bad guys in like the broadest possible strokes, which is going to lead to a couple, I think, moments in here where you're looking at the way that it's maybe using the real life, really horrible and tragic history of the Congo Crisis and using it as like a backdrop setting for a pulpy adventure story. I think could be a little uncomfortable for people. I think it was at the time, even when it came out. But despite that, as Andrew has laid out, I think very, very well, this is a more considerate and considered movie despite that than I think that you would expect of it if you do give it a shot. I think that Cardiff is an intelligent filmmaker and he's an intelligent photographer, so this is a beautiful movie. The pure action spectacle and montage and the procedural elements of the actual mission, this will make you think about movies like The Train. It'll make you think about movies like Lawrence of Arabia or The Wild Bunch. Like, those are all movies that I think will come to mind in some capacity, even if it doesn't have some of the elegance or the artistic credibility of some of those movies. The material is quite trashy and quite graphic and lurid. But I do think that despite that, there's an interesting tone there where the meanness and the gruesomeness really does send home the moral and philosophical debate at the heart of the movie, which is the difference between dispassionate, money-making violence as a tool and someone who is just sort of like animalistically enjoys it and doesn't think of it as something that is, as viscerally ugly and upsetting and as much of a political tool as it is, and then someone who is more, sensitive to that and thinks that, to acknowledge its existence is something you can do while not losing your humanity. And I think the movie actually does end up being a very bleak and barbarous depiction of war profiteering and being a mercenary and what foreign outsiders do to a native population when they go in there, and the chaos of the foreign affairs of all of it. And, I think it does have skepticism towards proxy power wars and the sort of capitalist powers at work here that are profiting off of what these guys do as like their dirty work on the ground and maintaining that perspective of it. So you can definitely see why Tarantino loves this movie and stole a number of elements from it for Inglourious Basterds. So if you like that movie, I think this is a must watch. And yeah, one of the earliest ever chainsaw fights, while also being a genuinely sad buddy movie about how killing is wrong. I don't think there's a better way to sum up what this movie is offering you with each of its hands than that.
Yeah. I'm right there with you. I think I'm also gonna for it. I love the way that this movie looks. Some of those distant camera shots that they were capturing the stunt work in, that, especially in that last chase sequence with the Jeep and the raft, I think is amazing. But there's also some really great sturdy camera work, even when they're doing something completely outlandish like a chainsaw fight. It's pretty crazy that I can say that sentence and we're still talking about something that feels sturdy and still very, very much like a war film that's built within a respected history, but then it has these outlandish action genres. And sometimes I do get why people would think that this has, it's kind of tasteless in a sense. But I do think that there's a lot more to it than just this kind of like brutal, outlandish action. I think the character of Curry is a very interesting character with a pretty deep arc compared to what you'd think something like this would have. I would have appreciated a character or two to humanize the rebels, just because they are kind of this like faceless group of like a mob almost that just kind of shows up, ambushes, they're there to fight, and that's it. And it I don't know much about the history at all, and I don't know much about some of the violence that the rebels did take part in, but it just feels like if you don't have some type of humanization, it doesn't even really help with the history that you're telling. So I yeah, I think it would have helped that in regards to not making it seem as one dimensional or even racist. So possibly. So it's I don't think it's hyper focused in the movie, so it doesn't bother me a ton. There's just these little moments where I'm like, you probably could have humanized them a little bit more. But yeah, I mean, I do think that this is great. It's incredibly well made, so I'd highly recommend it, and it's very, very, very underseen. And it seems too like this guy Cardiff didn't do a lot of other things like this, just in regards to some of the posters I'm looking at. Maybe I'm wrong, but this one just seems so over the top compared to the other things that I'm looking at here. So maybe I'm wrong. Someone can tell me, but it's
I'm gonna have to go check out more myself.
Yeah.
Else I disagree with you, but I need to watch it.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, great movie.
For you, Andrew.
It's the rare double 4 from me as well. I thought it was a beautiful film. It was visually spectacular. I loved the performances. I think Rod Taylor and Jim Brown in particular, like their whole dynamic, the way they communicated with each other, the things they were trying to say to each other, I thought was genuinely much more layered, I think, than I was expecting. If not for a movie from the 60s, then a movie of this genre more particularly, I think. Like, you know, we certainly know that there are many really interesting and thoughtful character studies from the 60s and beforehand, and wonderful showcases of acting, but it is not this kind of movie that you generally associate that kind of thing with, I think. I could be wrong. There are certainly classics of the genre, but largely speaking, like we think of this kind of movie, like the Suicide Squad, Man on a Mission, Behind Enemy Lines kind of stuff, as being much more like exploitation filmmaking, much more kind of trashy genre fare. So I was really pleasantly surprised by that. I totally get what you guys are saying about the depiction of the rebels in the Congo. I would have no trouble at all believing that what we were seeing was the collective image that Western society had of that conflict at the time, And with that in mind, I do think that the racial politics of the movie were really much more subtle and nuanced than I was possibly expecting them to be for a movie from 1968 about mercenaries going into the Congo to get some diamonds,
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and particularly in those moments, like where Jim Brown's talking to, he's talking to Rod Taylor's character about. Like he's extremely, Rod Taylor's character is very upset about the 2 children that the Nazi has killed. And Jim Brown's character is telling him about, the village that he grew up in, and that they believed in superstition, and that his dad had his teeth filed down, and lots of unpleasant stuff. And, and that he went away and learned a lot of things, and realizes that a bunch of that stuff is based on superstition and fear and everything. And he says, when he's talking about the Nazi, his parents filed his teeth down too. Like he's showing more of an attempt to not empathize with the Nazi, but to understand what made him what he is. And he displays more of a capability for doing that than the guy who is supposedly from a more civilized country. So yeah, he sort of occupies this space in the film where he's able to look at all of the different players and not just see them for what they are, but see them for what made them what they are as well. And it was just all a lot more.
And trying to stop his friend from turning into that and failing, obviously.
Yeah, from losing his humanity too, And at the end of the day, Jim Brown's character he wanted to do the right thing by the country he was from. He actually believed in the humanitarian part of the mission. And so at the very end of the film, if that's what sort of got taken away from it, was they saved a small group of people, and Curry kind of stops to try and take account and take responsibility for his own actions, because that's what his friend would have wanted. And that, I think it's a surprising level of sort of heart and nuance to a film of this genre. And
that features an extended chainsaw fight.
Extended chainsaw fight.
Possibly the first.
But yeah, I loved it. It was great. It was a beautiful film. Just looked fantastic. Great stunt work. Great acting all around.
Totally.
Wonderful stuff.
If you love MP40 destruction and squibs and train action,
yes,
it's got
it
loaded with it. But I think that's going to wrap it up for Dark of the Sun and for this week's episode. That was once again Eastern Condors from 1987 and Dark of the Sun from 1968. Thanks so much, Andrew, for joining us and for talking about these films with us. What's going on in Boonta Vista land?
We are continuing to make our podcast all these years later.
Oh, man.
More segments than ever. More stingers than ever. More confusing topics of discussion. More alienating than ever to try and introduce to a coworker. That's our promise to you.
Check it out. Please check it out. Go on over there. If you're interested in all of the Australian facts that Andrew had today, he has even more over on his show Down Under. But for our listeners, we're going to be back in 1 week's time, where, as Jamie alluded to, we're going to be going submarine mode. We're going to be talking about The Hunt for Red October and Crimson Tide. McTiernan, Tony Scott, Gene Hackman, and Sean Connery. We have a whole bunch of big names that we're excited. Denzel's in there too.
Oh yeah.
For anyone who's interested, that's what we're going to be talking about next week over on the Patreon exclusively. And then in 2 weeks' time, we are substituting back in the episode that was supposed to happen a little bit earlier here, but got moved around. We're going to be talking about, once again, David Fincher's Seven, because it is the 30th anniversary. We have somehow never talked about David Fincher, which is crazy. It is. And we're going to be pairing it with a movie called The Mothman Prophecies, which I don't exactly know how it connects, but I'm sure we're going to find out.
Looking forward to finding out how.
That's right. But yeah, that's going to wrap it up for everything this week. Thanks so much for listening, and keep it sleazy.
Keep it sleazy, everybody.
Keep it sleazy.